In a mansion built on blood and silence, a $25 an hour maid became the only person who could hear what the Mafia boss's wife was screaming, and what she discovered in those stolen conversations would either save them both or get them killed. The Brown mansion didn't whisper its secrets, it swallowed them whole. Naomi Robinson had learned this in her first week of employment, when she'd accidentally walked into the East Wing study and found Michael Brown sitting behind a desk that probably cost more than her entire life, calmly cleaning a gun while discussing someone's retirement on speakerphone. He'd looked up at her with eyes that could have been carved from stone, nodded once, and returned to his conversation as if she were a piece of furniture. She'd backed out slowly, her heart threatening to break free from her ribcage, and nobody had mentioned it again. That was the thing about working for people like the Browns. You learned to be blind, deaf, and selectively amnesic. The pay was good, better than scrubbing floors at the hospital or serving coffee to people who looked through her like she was made of glass. $700 a week, cash, no questions asked. In return, she cleaned. She kept her mouth shut, and she pretended not to notice the men in expensive suits who came and went at odd hours, or the way certain rooms stayed locked, or the fact that her employer's business cards never quite explained what business he was actually in. Naomi could live with that. She'd lived with worse. Welcome back, my amazing family and friends. If you're tuned in and excited for today's story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, because tomorrow I've got another fascinating story coming your way that you definitely won't want to miss. Now, let's get back to the story. The apartment she'd left that morning was a testament to compromise, a studio in a building where the elevator worked maybe 3 days out of 7, where Mrs. Chen upstairs played the same Chinese opera at full volume every single morning at 6 a.m., and where the radiator clanked like it was personally offended by the concept of heat. But it was hers. No foster parents, no social workers, no revolving door of temporary families who looked at her like she was a problem to be managed rather than a person to be loved. At 25, Naomi had exactly 3 things she could count on: her ability to clean anything, her determination to survive, and the memory of Jasmine's hands forming words in the dark. She hadn't thought about Jasmine in months, hadn't allowed herself to, really. That was ancient history. 2 girls in a broken system, clinging to each other until the system pried them apart and sent them spinning into separate futures. Jasmine had aged out at 18 and vanished into whatever life waited for deaf kids with no family and no resources. Naomi had lasted in foster care until she was 21, courtesy of a program for kids with nowhere else to go, and then she'd been released into the wild like a rehabilitated animal that nobody was quite sure would survive. She'd survived just fine. Survival was her specialty. The bus ride to the Brown mansion took 45 minutes and 2 transfers, carrying her from the cramped grid of the city's south side up into the hills where the air tasted cleaner and the houses stood behind gates like medieval fortresses. She'd gotten used to the journey, used to the way the other passengers thinned out as the bus climbed higher, until she was often the only person left, a black woman in a cleaning company uniform heading up to polish the floors of people who'd never spent a day worrying about rent. The irony wasn't lost on her. The Browns' money came from activities that destroyed communities like the one she'd just left. But Naomi had learned long ago that morality was a luxury she couldn't afford. She needed the job, she needed the money, she needed to eat and pay rent, and maybe someday save enough to be something other than a maid. Judging her employers was above her pay grade. She arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, the way Margaret, the head housekeeper, insisted. Margaret was a white woman in her 50s who ran the household staff with the efficiency of a general and the warmth of a filing cabinet. She'd made it clear from day one that Naomi was replaceable, that dozens of women would gladly take her position, and that anything less than perfection would result in immediate termination. "You're late," Margaret said when Naomi walked in, even though the kitchen clock read 6:58 a.m. "The bus. I don't care about your transportation challenges. You're expected at 7, which means you should arrive at 6:45 to prepare. Do better." Naomi swallowed the response that wanted to climb out of her throat and settled for a nod. Pick your battles, her last foster mother used to say. Save your energy for the wars that matter. Mrs. Brown will be down for breakfast at 8, Margaret continued, consulting a tablet that probably cost more than Naomi's security deposit. Mr. Brown is already in his office and is not to be disturbed. The guest rooms need a deep clean. We're expecting visitors this weekend. The pool house needs attention. And for God's sake, use the good cleaning products, not the cheap stuff. Mr. Brown notices these things. Mr. Brown probably noticed when people stopped breathing too, but Naomi kept that observation to herself. She collected her supplies from the service closet, a room that was larger than her entire apartment and better organized than most libraries, and began her rounds. The mansion was a study in excess, 14 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, a wine cellar that required its own climate control system, a gym that would make professional athletes weep with envy, and a kitchen that could have been transplanted from a Michelin-starred restaurant. Naomi had been raised to believe that hard work and determination could get you anywhere, but after 2 weeks in the Brown mansion, she'd revised that belief. Hard work got you survival. Money got you this. She was dusting the library, a room with more books than she'd probably read in her entire life, most of which looked like they'd never been opened. When she heard the sound, or rather didn't hear it, the mansion had a particular rhythm, a background hum of controlled chaos. But there were moments of silence that felt different, heavier, like the air before a storm. Naomi's hands stilled on the mahogany shelf. The library opened onto a hallway that led to the main staircase, and she had a direct line of sight to the foyer below. Olivia Brown was descending the stairs, moving with the careful precision of someone navigating a world that had fundamentally shifted. She wore a cream-colored blouse and tailored pants that probably cost more than Naomi made in a month. Her dark hair pulled back in a way that should have looked elegant but instead looked like armor. The hearing aids were subtle, barely visible, the kind of expensive discretion that money could buy. But it was Olivia's face that stopped Naomi cold. She'd seen that expression before, staring back at her from bathroom mirrors in a dozen different foster homes. It was the look of someone who'd learned to expect nothing from the people around them, someone who'd been disappointed so many times that hope had become a liability. Margaret appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her mouth moving in that rapid-fire way she had. Naomi couldn't hear what she was saying from this distance, but she could see Olivia's face go carefully blank, that universal expression of someone who had no idea what was being said, but had learned to pretend. Margaret didn't slow down, didn't face Olivia directly, just kept talking while gesturing vaguely toward the dining room before walking away. Olivia stood there for a moment, alone in a foyer that could fit Naomi's entire apartment 3 times over, and the expression on her face was so raw that Naomi had to look away. It felt voyeuristic, witnessing that moment of unguarded pain. "Stay in your lane," Naomi told herself. "This isn't your problem." She finished the library and moved on to the guest rooms, where she stripped beds and scrubbed bathrooms and tried not to calculate how many hours she'd have to work to afford the thread count of these sheets. The mansion was beautiful in that aggressive way that expensive things often are, demanding admiration, insisting on awe. But Naomi had grown up in places where beauty was a stranger, and she'd learned to be suspicious of things that looked too perfect. Perfect things had sharp edges. Perfect things drew blood. By 10 a.m. she'd worked her way to the main kitchen, where staff meals were prepared, and where Margaret held court like a monarch in exile. The room was empty, the morning rush over, the lunch preparation not yet begun. Naomi was supposed to clean the floor, a task she'd learned to hate because the Italian marble showed every streak, and Margaret inspected her work with the intensity of a detective examining a crime scene. She was filling her bucket when she heard footsteps. Olivia entered the kitchen like someone entering enemy territory, her movements careful, her eyes scanning the room before settling on the coffee maker. Naomi watched from the corner where she was working, trying to be invisible the way she'd learned to be invisible her entire life. Olivia moved to the machine, stared at it for a moment, then reached for a mug from the cabinet. The cabinet door stuck. These expensive things always had some quirk, and Olivia pulled harder, her frustration evident in the set of her shoulders. When it finally opened, she grabbed a mug too quickly, and it slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor in an explosion of ceramic shards. Olivia's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes going wide. She stood frozen, staring at the broken pieces, and Naomi could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. How much trouble was this? Who would be angry? What was the appropriate response to breaking something in a house where everything cost more than normal people could imagine? And that's when Margaret appeared, as if summoned by the sound of something expensive breaking. "Mrs. Brown!" Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "What happened?" Olivia turned toward her, trying to read lips, trying to understand, but Margaret was already moving forward, already talking in that rapid way that made lip-reading impossible. "You need to be more careful. These mugs are imported from Italy. They're not cheap. I'll have to note this for Mr. Brown. Please, just go to the dining room. I'll bring your coffee. You shouldn't be in the kitchen anyway." Olivia's face did something complicated. Hurt and anger and resignation all fighting for space. Her mouth opened, then closed. She tried to sign something, but Margaret wasn't looking, was already bending down to collect the broken pieces, still talking, a running monologue that Olivia couldn't possibly follow. "I'll have someone clean this up. Please, Mrs. Brown, the kitchen really isn't appropriate. You have staff for these things." Olivia stood there for another heartbeat, her hands clenched at her sides, then turned and walked out. She moved like someone who'd been dismissed from her own home, and something in Naomi's chest cracked watching her go. Margaret straightened up, pieces of broken mug cradled in her hands, and for the first time noticed Naomi standing there. "Don't just stand there gawking. Get this cleaned up. And be careful. The fragments are everywhere." Naomi nodded, grabbed her dustpan and broom, and knelt on the marble floor that probably cost more per square foot than her monthly rent. She swept carefully, methodically, finding shards that had traveled surprisingly far from the impact point. Margaret deposited the larger pieces in the trash and left, muttering something about difficult situations that made Naomi's teeth clench. She was on her hands and knees, checking for any remaining fragments, when she heard the footsteps return. Olivia stood in the doorway, her face composed now, that careful mask back in place. She'd come back for her coffee, Naomi realized, or maybe just to reclaim some sense of control over her own space. She moved to the counter, began working the coffee machine with the determined air of someone refusing to be defeated by appliances. Naomi finished sweeping, dumped the ceramic fragments in the trash, and was about to leave when she saw it happen again. Margaret reappeared. The woman had timing like a shark sensing blood, carrying a tablet and already talking. "Mrs. Brown, I need to discuss the weekend arrangements. Mr. Brown has guests coming, business associates, and will need the south wing prepared. I'll need you to—" She was standing at an angle, her face half turned away, words coming out in that unstoppable stream while Olivia stood there with her coffee mug, her face crumbling in real time. She was trying so hard to understand, her eyes tracking Margaret's barely visible lips, but it was impossible. You couldn't lip-read someone who wasn't facing you. You couldn't understand someone who wouldn't slow down, wouldn't make eye contact, wouldn't try. Margaret finished whatever she was saying and left again, and Olivia stood there alone, tears starting to track down her face. She set the coffee mug down carefully, like it might also betray her and shatter, and her hands came up in a gesture that Naomi recognized instantly. Olivia was signing to herself, just her hands moving in small, frustrated movements, talking to an empty room because nobody else was listening. "I hate this. I hate feeling stupid. I hate being invisible." The words were sharp, angry, the kind of private venting you did when you thought nobody was watching. And Naomi knew she should leave, should pretend she hadn't seen, should maintain the careful blindness that working here required. But Jasmine's voice was in her head, Jasmine at 14, teaching her the signs for friend and sister and always, and her hands moved before her brain could stop them. "Are you okay?" The effect was electric. Olivia's head snapped up, her eyes going wide with something that looked like shock, then hope, then fear in rapid succession. She stared at Naomi like she'd materialized out of thin air, like she might be a hallucination or a cruel trick. Her hands moved slowly, rusty with disuse. "You sign?" "Yes," Naomi signed back, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. "I learned from a friend." And Olivia smiled. Not the careful, controlled smile she gave to everyone else. A real smile, the kind that transformed her entire face and made her look younger, lighter, less like a prisoner in her own home. "Thank you," she signed, and her hands were shaking. "Thank you for seeing me." Naomi nodded, suddenly acutely aware of where they were, of who might walk in, of the fact that she'd just stepped way outside the boundaries of her job description. But Olivia was still smiling, and something in Naomi's chest loosened for the first time since she'd started working here. "What's your name?" Olivia asked. "Naomi. I'm Olivia." A pause, then, "Please don't tell anyone you can sign." "Not yet. I need to think about this." "Why?" Olivia's smile turned sad, complicated. "Because in this house everything has consequences, and I don't want yours to be bad because you were kind to me." Before Naomi could respond, they both heard footsteps approaching. Olivia's expression shifted instantly, that mask snapping back into place. She picked up her coffee mug and walked past Naomi without another glance, playing her part perfectly. But as she passed, her hand brushed against Naomi's shoulder, just once, barely contact at all, and Naomi understood what it meant. "Thank you. I see you too." Naomi stood in the empty kitchen, her cleaning supplies forgotten, and realized that she'd just done something spectacularly stupid. In Michael Brown's world, kindness was currency, and she'd just spent some without knowing the exchange rate. She should have kept her head down. She should have stayed invisible. But when she closed her eyes, she could still see Olivia's smile, real and unguarded and achingly grateful, and she knew that some risks were worth taking, even if they got you killed. The rest of Tuesday passed in a blur of hyper-awareness. Naomi moved through the mansion like a soldier in a minefield, certain that someone would notice the shift in the atmosphere, that Margaret would somehow sense what had passed between her and Olivia in the kitchen. But the house continued its usual rhythm, Michael's voice echoing from his office as he conducted business that nobody was supposed to hear, the chef arriving at noon to begin prep for dinner, Margaret barking orders at the small army of staff that kept the Brown Empire running smoothly. Nobody noticed anything. Nobody except Naomi, whose hands wouldn't stop trembling every time she remembered the way Olivia had signed "Thank you for seeing me." She finished her shift at 3 p.m., collected her cash payment from Margaret, 7 crisp $100 bills that always made her feel like she was being paid for something illegal, and caught the bus back down the hill toward reality. The descent always felt like traveling between worlds, from the rarefied air of wealth back down to the streets where people actually lived. By the time she reached her apartment, she'd almost convinced herself that the kitchen conversation had been a fever dream, something she'd imagined to make the tedium of scrubbing floors more interesting. But when she closed her eyes that night, lying on a mattress that squeaked every time she moved, she could still see Olivia's face, could still feel the weight of that moment when they'd connected across the chasm of their different worlds. Wednesday morning arrived with Mrs. Chen's opera performance at 6 a.m. sharp, a tradition that had inspired Naomi to invest in earplugs that didn't actually work. She dragged herself out of bed, showered in water that never quite got hot enough, and caught the first bus up the hill. The November air had teeth this morning, promising an early winter that would make her apartment even more miserable than usual. Margaret was waiting when she arrived, clipboard in hand like a weapon. "You're on the second floor today. Mrs. Brown's private quarters need attention. She has a doctor's appointment at 10, so you'll have the space to yourself. Deep clean everything, and I mean everything. Mr. Brown has been concerned about her environment." Naomi nodded, accepting the assignment with what she hoped was an appropriate level of professional detachment. Inside, her stomach performed gymnastics, Olivia's private quarters, the spaces where she lived when she wasn't performing the role of Mafia boss's wife for the benefit of staff and visitors. "The master suite is off limits," Margaret continued, her voice sharp with emphasis. "Mr. Brown's office, obviously, is never to be entered. But Mrs. Brown's sitting room, her bathroom, her dressing area, all of those need work. Use the lavender cleaning products she prefers. They're in the supply closet, clearly labeled." Of course they were. In the Brown mansion, even the cleaning products had a hierarchy. Naomi gathered her supplies and climbed the sweeping staircase to the second floor, where the walls were painted in shades of cream and gold, that probably had pretentious names like Champagne Whisper or Gilded Dawn. Olivia's quarters occupied the east wing, 3 interconnected rooms that formed a suite larger than most apartments. The sitting room came first, decorated in soft blues and greys that somehow managed to feel both expensive and cold. A couch that looked like it had never been sat on. Bookshelves lined with novels that appeared to be more decoration than reading material. A desk by the window that overlooked the gardens, its surface clear except for a laptop and a small framed photograph. Naomi shouldn't have looked at the photograph, should have started dusting, should have maintained professional boundaries, but curiosity was a drug, and she was an addict. The photo showed a younger Olivia, maybe early 30s, standing next to a woman who could have been her sister. They were at a beach somewhere, both laughing, both windswept and happy in that unself-conscious way people look when they don't know their lives are about to change. The resemblance was striking, same dark hair, same elegant bone structure, but where Olivia looked guarded even in this old photo, the other woman looked open, warm, like someone who'd never learned to be afraid. "That's my sister, Christina." Naomi spun around so fast she nearly dropped her dustcloth. Olivia stood in the doorway, dressed in yoga pants and an oversized sweater that somehow looked both comfortable and expensive. Her hair was down, and without the armor of styled hair and designer clothes, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "I'm sorry," Naomi said out loud, then caught herself and signed it. "I shouldn't have been looking." "It's okay." Olivia moved into the room, her movements careful, like she was testing boundaries. "I'm supposed to be at a doctor's appointment, but I cancelled. I hate the way they talk around me, about me, like I'm not there." "I understand." "Do you?" Olivia's hands moved with more confidence now, the rust wearing off. "Do you really understand what it's like to be invisible in your own life?" Naomi thought about foster care, about being shuffled from home to home, like a piece of furniture nobody wanted, about social workers who discussed her future while looking at clipboards instead of her face. She thought about being the only black girl in most of those homes, about learning to make herself small and quiet and easy to overlook. "Yes," she signed simply. "I understand." Olivia studied her for a long moment, and Naomi had the unsettling feeling of being truly seen, really looked at in a way that went beyond surface assessment. It was uncomfortable and exhilarating at the same time. "Your friend who taught you to sign?" Olivia's hands asked. "What happened to her?" "We grew up in foster care together. She aged out at 18. I haven't seen her since." "You miss her?" It wasn't a question, but Naomi answered anyway. "Every day." Olivia nodded slowly, then moved to the couch that had probably never been used and sat down, patting the space beside her in invitation. Naomi hesitated, acutely aware of the boundaries being crossed, the lines being blurred. She was staff. Olivia was the boss's wife. There were rules about this kind of thing, unspoken but ironclad, but Olivia was looking at her with an expression that was equal parts hopeful and heartbreaking, and Naomi had never been good at saying no to people who looked at her like she mattered. She sat down carefully, maintaining a respectable distance, her cleaning supplies forgotten on the floor. "Tell me the truth," Olivia signed, her movements deliberate and slow. "Why did you talk to me yesterday? In the kitchen?" "You looked the way I used to feel," Naomi signed back honestly. "Alone in a room full of people. And you know how to fix that?" "No, but I know how to see it. Sometimes that's enough." Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to cry silently, to grieve without making noise. "I used to be someone," she signed, and the words came faster now, like a dam breaking. "I had a career. I was a translator, 5 languages. I traveled. I was good at what I did. Then I met Michael and everything changed, not all at once, slowly, like going blind 1 degree at a time until you wake up one day and realize you can't see anything anymore. He made you stop working. He didn't make me. He just... His world doesn't leave room for wives who have their own lives. There were threats, people who wanted to hurt him through me. So I stayed home, stayed safe, became smaller and smaller until I fit into the box he needed me to fill." She paused, her hands hovering in the air between them. Then the bomb happened, and I thought maybe losing my hearing would be the worst thing, but it wasn't. The worst thing was realizing that nobody cared enough to learn how to talk to me differently. They just adapted around me, like I was a broken appliance they had to work around rather than a person who needed help. What about Michael? Olivia's smile was bitter. Michael loves me, I know he does, but he loves me the way you love a rare painting, something precious to protect and display. He doesn't know how to love me as a person who needs connection, who needs to be heard even when she can't hear. He tried at first, hired specialists, bought equipment, threw money at the problem, but money can't buy empathy, and when the money didn't fix it, he didn't know what else to do. So he just kept going, running his empire, making his deals, coming home to a wife who might as well be a ghost. Naomi didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to respond to the raw honesty of it. So she did the only thing she could think of. She reached out and took Olivia's hand, just held it. A simple touch that said, "I'm here," without requiring words or signs or complicated explanations. Olivia squeezed back, and they sat like that for a moment, two women from completely different worlds finding common ground in the universal language of loneliness. "Can I ask you something?" Naomi signed when they finally broke apart. "Anything. The photograph. Your sister. Does she know sign language?" Olivia's face did something complicated. Christina died 2 years ago. Car accident. She spelled out the name in fingerspelling, each letter deliberate. She was the only person who really tried after the bombing. She started learning ASL, took classes, practiced with me. She made everyone at family dinners face me when they talked. She was my person, and then she was gone, and I was alone again. I'm sorry. Me too. Olivia stood up, moved to the window, stared out at the manicured gardens that probably required a full-time staff to maintain. "That's why I need to ask you something. And you can say no. You should probably say no. It would be smarter." Naomi waited, her heart rate picking up. Whatever this was, it felt significant. "I need a friend," Olivia signed, still facing the window, her hands moving in profile. "I need someone I can talk to. Really talk to. Not someone who's paid to be here or obligated by marriage or too afraid of Michael to be honest. I need someone who can see me." She turned back to face Naomi. "But I know that's not fair. You work here. I'm basically your boss. And in Michael's world, everything is complicated and dangerous, and I have no right to ask you to get involved in that. But you're asking anyway," Naomi signed. "Yes, because I'm desperate. Because 3 months of silence is making me insane. Because you're the first person who's looked at me like I'm a human being instead of a problem to be managed." A pause. "Because I think maybe you understand what it means to be invisible." Naomi thought about her apartment with its broken heating and noisy neighbors, thought about her $700 a week cash and the freedom that money represented, thought about Margaret's warnings and the men in expensive suits and the gun she'd seen Michael cleaning that first week. She thought about all the sensible reasons to say no, to maintain boundaries, to stay in her lane. Then she thought about Jasmine, about the nights they'd signed to each other in the dark, creating a private world that the system couldn't touch, about the way it felt to be seen, really seen, by someone who understood. "I'll be your friend," she signed, "but we have to be careful. If Margaret finds out..." "She won't. We'll be smart. You're here 4 days a week. I'm always home. We can talk when no one's watching. Just talk. Like normal people." Olivia's smile was tentative, hopeful. "Is that crazy?" "Probably. But you'll do it anyway?" "Yes." The word hung in the air between them, a promise and a potential disaster all wrapped up together. Naomi had no idea what she'd just agreed to, no concept of the consequences that would spiral out from this moment. All she knew was that Olivia was smiling again, and that smile made the risk feel worth it. "Thank you," Olivia signed, her movements emphatic. "You have no idea what this means." "I think I do." They heard footsteps on the stairs. Margaret's distinctive march, purposeful and impatient. Olivia's expression shifted instantly, that mask sliding back into place with practiced ease. She moved to the desk, picked up her laptop, transformed herself back into the boss's wife, who didn't need anything from anyone. Naomi grabbed her cleaning supplies and started dusting the bookshelf, playing her part perfectly. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her eyes scanning the room with suspicious efficiency. "Mrs. Brown, I thought you had a doctor's appointment." Olivia turned, her face carefully neutral, and spoke out loud, something Naomi hadn't heard her do before. Her voice was slightly flat, the way voices sometimes are when you can't hear yourself, but perfectly understandable. "I cancelled, I didn't feel well. You should have told me, I could have rescheduled appropriately." Margaret's disapproval was palpable. "And you," she turned to Naomi, "you should be further along than this. The bathroom still needs attention." "Yes, ma'am." Margaret left with a final suspicious glance, and Naomi forced herself to continue dusting, to not look at Olivia, to maintain the fiction that nothing had changed. But everything had changed. She finished the sitting room and moved to the bathroom, a space of marble and gold fixtures that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. She cleaned mechanically, her mind elsewhere, replaying the conversation. She'd just agreed to a secret friendship with the wife of a man who cleaned guns in his study and had business associates who visited at odd hours. She'd just crossed every professional boundary and common sense guideline that had kept her safe her entire adult life. And somehow, inexplicably, it felt like the rightest thing she'd done in years. When she finished and collected her supplies to leave, she found a small note tucked under her cleaning caddy, written in elegant handwriting, "Thank you for seeing what everyone else missed." Oh, Naomi pocketed the note quickly, her heart racing, and headed downstairs to her next assignment. Behind her, in the sitting room with its expensive furniture and its lonely view, Olivia sat at her desk and smiled at nothing in particular, feeling less invisible than she had in 3 months. Neither of them noticed the security camera in the corner, its red recording light barely visible in the afternoon sun. Neither of them knew that in his office 2 floors below, Michael Brown was reviewing the day's footage, his expression unreadable as he watched his wife and the new maid signing to each other. He made a note on his phone, "Find out everything about Naomi Robinson." Then he returned to his work, already forgetting the incident in the face of more pressing business concerns. It was a small thing, barely worth his attention. His wife had found someone to talk to. That was good, wasn't it? That was what he'd wanted for her. He didn't yet understand that small things could have large consequences, that kindness could be a catalyst, that in the space between Olivia's silence and Naomi's hands, a chain of events had been set in motion that would expose secrets, betray loyalties, and force everyone in the Brown mansion to choose sides in a war that nobody had seen coming. The game had truly begun now. The pieces were moving, and neither Naomi nor Olivia had any idea what they'd just started. Thursday arrived wrapped in fog so thick that Naomi couldn't see across the street from her bus stop. The weather felt prophetic somehow, like the universe was commenting on the murkiness of the situation she'd walked into. She'd barely slept the night before, her mind replaying the conversation with Olivia on an endless loop, alternating between elation at having made a real connection and terror at the potential consequences. She'd Googled Michael Brown at 2 a.m., sitting in her dim apartment with her phone's brightness turned down low, as if someone might see her searching. The results had been educational in the worst possible way. Most articles were carefully worded, alleged connections to organized crime and reputed business interests, the kind of language journalists used when their lawyers were nervous. But between the lines, the picture was clear. Michael Brown was dangerous. His empire built on activities that didn't bear close examination, and people who crossed him had a tendency to disappear or develop sudden health problems. And she'd just agreed to a secret friendship with his wife. Smart, Naomi. Real smart. The bus dropped her at the mansion gates at 6:47 a.m. She was early, which meant Margaret couldn't criticize her timing at least. The fog made the estate look like something from a Gothic novel, all looming shapes and uncertain shadows. Naomi shivered as she walked up the long driveway, pulling her jacket tighter against the November chill. Margaret was waiting in the kitchen, which was never a good sign. The woman usually spent her mornings in her office, a converted pantry that she'd transformed into a command center, emerging only to deliver assignments or criticism. Seeing her standing by the industrial-sized coffee maker, 2 other staff members flanking her like nervous soldiers, made Naomi's stomach drop. "Naomi, good you're here." Margaret's tone was clipped, professional, but something in her eyes was different, sharper. "We need to discuss your responsibilities moving forward." "Here it comes. She knows. Someone saw. I'm fired. Mrs. Brown has requested that you be assigned as her personal aide, in addition to your regular cleaning duties." Naomi blinked, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "Mrs. Brown has specific needs, as you're aware. She's found the rotating staff schedule challenging. She's asked that one person be consistently assigned to her quarters and personal assistance. You'll continue your regular duties, but you'll also be responsible for Mrs. Brown's immediate environment and needs." Margaret said all of this with the enthusiasm of someone swallowing glass. Clearly, this arrangement hadn't been her idea. Okay, thank you." "Don't thank me, thank Mrs. Brown. She was quite insistent." Margaret's expression suggested that Olivia's insistence had been a point of contention. "You'll start immediately. Mrs. Brown is in the conservatory. She's expecting you." The conservatory was on the south side of the mansion, a glass-walled room full of plants that probably required PhD-level botanical knowledge to maintain. Naomi had cleaned it once before, tiptoeing around exotic orchids and ferns that looked like they cost more than her monthly rent. She made her way there now, her heart hammering, trying to understand what had just happened. Olivia had somehow arranged this, had gone to Margaret, or more likely to Michael, and requested that Naomi be assigned specifically to her. It was a brilliant move, really. It gave them legitimate reasons to be together, to spend time in proximity without raising suspicions. It was also incredibly risky because it drew attention, made their connection official and observable. The conservatory smelled like earth and growing things, humid and alive in a way that felt foreign in the otherwise climate-controlled mansion. Olivia stood by the windows, staring out at the fog-shrouded gardens, her silhouette backlit by the grey morning light. She turned when Naomi entered, and her face broke into that genuine smile that transformed her completely. "Good morning," she signed. "Good morning." Naomi glanced around nervously. "What did you do?" "I asked my husband for something I needed. He said yes. He usually does, as long as it doesn't interfere with his business." Olivia's hands moved with growing confidence, the ASL coming back to her like a language she'd temporarily forgotten, but never truly lost. "Now we can talk without everyone wondering why the maid is spending time in my quarters. You're my aide. It's your job to be near me." Margaret looked thrilled about it. Margaret will adjust. She works for Michael, and Michael gave the order. She won't question it. Naomi wanted to ask about the security cameras, about whether Michael knew that Olivia could sign, about 1,000 other logistical questions. But Olivia's smile was so hopeful, so genuinely happy, that she didn't have the heart to inject paranoia into the moment. "So what do you need me to do?" Naomi signed. "As your aide, I mean. Right now, just talk to me. Tell me about your life. I've been surrounded by people for 3 months, but I haven't had a real conversation with anyone. I don't even know what's happening in the world anymore." They sat on the wrought iron bench by the orchids, and Naomi found herself talking, signing, about things she hadn't discussed with anyone in years, about growing up in foster care, about the families who'd taken her in with varying degrees of interest and care, about Jasmine and their midnight conversations, about aging out of the system and learning to navigate a world that had prepared her for nothing but expected her to succeed anyway. "You're 25, and you've already survived more than most people do in a lifetime," Olivia signed when Naomi paused. "That's incredible. It doesn't feel incredible. It just feels like survival. That's because you're still in it. Someday you'll look back and realize how strong you had to be." "What about you?" Naomi asked. "You said you were a translator. 5 languages?" Olivia's expression softened with memory. "English, Spanish, French, Italian, and Portuguese. I fell in love with languages in college. The way different words could express the same emotion, but with completely different nuances. I worked for the UN for a while, did freelance translation for businesses, traveled constantly. I was good at it. Really good." "Why did you stop?" Michael. The name was finger-spelled, deliberate, not because he asked me to, at first. But his world, it's not compatible with the kind of life I had. The travel became dangerous. The people I met became potential threats. And he was so worried all the time about something happening to me. So I started saying no to jobs, stayed home more, made myself smaller to make him feel safer. And then one day I woke up and realized I'd been home for 6 months straight, and I couldn't even remember the last time someone had asked me to translate something. Do you regret it? Marrying him? No. Yes. Sometimes. Her hands paused, searching for the right signs. I love him, but I don't know if the person I am now is someone I like very much. I became the wife he needed instead of the person I was. And then the bomb took my hearing, and suddenly I couldn't even be a good wife anymore because I couldn't hear his concerns, or attend his events properly, or perform the role I'd built my entire life around. You're more than a role, Naomi signed firmly. You're a person. You don't exist just to be his wife. Try telling him that. But Olivia was smiling, sad and knowing. In Michael's world, everyone exists in relation to him. I'm his wife. You're his employee. His business associates are his assets or his enemies. He loves me, but he doesn't know how to see me as separate from what I can do for him. Before Naomi could respond, the conservatory door opened. They both turned, and Naomi's blood ran cold. Michael Brown stood in the doorway, immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car, if she had a car. His hair was dark and perfectly styled, his face handsome in that sharp-edged way that probably made him devastating at negotiating tables and intimidating in confrontations. His eyes moved from Olivia to Naomi and back again, assessing, calculating. He said something, his lips moving, but Naomi couldn't hear from this distance, and Olivia obviously couldn't either. Olivia stood quickly, smoothing her hands down her pants in a nervous gesture, and moved toward him. Michael's expression softened when he looked at his wife, softened in a way that would have been touching if Naomi hadn't been actively terrified. He reached out, touched Olivia's cheek with genuine tenderness, then spoke again, slowly this time, facing her so she could read his lips. Olivia nodded, signed something back, simple signs that Michael seemed to understand, or at least recognize, then gestured toward Naomi. Michael's gaze swung back to her, and Naomi forced herself to stand, to meet his eyes, to not show the fear that was currently doing gymnastics in her chest. He walked over, and up close, he was even more intimidating. Not because of his size, he was maybe 6 feet, well built but not bulky, but because of the way he carried himself, like a man who'd never been told no, who'd never encountered a problem he couldn't solve with money or violence or both. Naomi Robinson. His voice was smooth, educated, with just a hint of something rougher underneath. Brooklyn, maybe, or Queens. Old neighborhood, carefully polished away. My wife tells me you know sign language. Yes, sir. Where'd you learn? It wasn't really a question. It was a test. Foster care, sir. I had a friend who was deaf. She taught me. And you just happened to end up working in my house. I work for the cleaning company, sir. They assigned me here. I didn't know about Mrs. Brown's situation until I arrived. Michael studied her for a long moment, and Naomi had the uncomfortable sensation of being X-rayed, analyzed, measured for threat level. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. It didn't quite reach his eyes, but it transformed his face from intimidating to almost charming. My wife is happy. That's all that matters to me. You understand that? Yes, sir. You'll be paid more. Double your current rate. Margaret will handle the details. You'll be available whenever Olivia needs you, within reason. Your primary job is to help her feel less isolated. Can you do that? I'll do my best, sir. Good. He turned back to Olivia, signed something that looked like I have to go but moved too quickly for Naomi to catch everything. Olivia signed back, and they had a brief exchange that ended with Michael kissing her forehead. Gentle, possessive, loving, in that complicated way that probably defined their entire relationship. Then he was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive cologne and the weight of unspoken warnings. Olivia waited until his footsteps faded, then turned to Naomi with an expression that was equal parts relieved and nervous. Well, she signed. That could have gone worse. He knows we were talking. He knows I'm happy. That's all he cares about right now. Michael doesn't pay attention to things unless they threaten him or his business. A friendship between his wife and her aide doesn't register as either. You're sure about that? No. Olivia's honesty was startling. But I'm willing to risk it. Are you? Naomi thought about the doubled salary, $1,400 a week, cash, which would change her life in ways she could barely imagine. She thought about Olivia's smile and the way it felt to connect with someone who understood isolation. She thought about Michael's eyes and the casual way he discussed making his wife happy, as if happiness were another commodity he could purchase. Yes, she signed. I'm willing to risk it. Then let's not waste time worrying. Tell me more about your friend. Jasmine. What was she like? And just like that, they slipped back into conversation, two women carving out space for friendship in a house built on secrets and silence. They talked for an hour, then two, losing track of time in the humid warmth of the conservatory. Naomi told stories about her and Jasmine's adventures in the foster system, some funny, some heartbreaking, all true. Olivia listened with an intensity that suggested she was starving for connection, for stories, for anything that made her feel less alone. Around noon, Olivia's phone buzzed, a smartwatch she wore that apparently helped her stay connected despite her hearing loss. She checked it, sighed, and signed. I have a physical therapy appointment. For my shoulder. The bomb injured it and they make me do exercises. Should I come with you, would you? The hope in Olivia's face was almost painful to see. That's what aides do, right? The physical therapy session was in the mansion's gym, with a therapist who showed up like clockwork every Thursday. The woman, late 30s, blonde, professionally cheerful, clearly hadn't been briefed about Olivia's hearing loss, or at least hadn't adjusted her approach to accommodate it. She gave instructions while turned away, demonstrated exercises without checking if Olivia was following, and spoke in the rapid, distracted way of someone who saw this as just another appointment in a long day. Naomi found herself translating, not through sign language but through positioning, making sure Olivia could see the therapist's demonstrations, tapping her shoulder when instructions were given, repeating things when necessary. It was exhausting and infuriating watching a professional fail so completely at basic communication. When the session ended, Olivia looked drained, frustrated, her shoulder obviously aching. She's terrible, Olivia signed once the therapist had left. But Michael hired her, and she's supposedly the best, so I'm stuck with her. Have you told him she's not working out? How? Every conversation with Michael lately feels like shouting into a void. He asks if I'm okay, I say yes, and we move on. Actually explaining why I'm not okay requires more energy than I usually have. They were heading back upstairs when they encountered Margaret in the hallway. The head housekeeper's expression was sour, her tablet clutched like a shield. Mrs. Brown has lunch scheduled with Mr. Brown's business associates at 1 p.m. You'll need to change. Margaret directed this at Olivia, speaking rapidly without facing her, making lip reading impossible. Naomi saw Olivia's face close down, saw her nod automatically, even though she clearly hadn't understood everything. Excuse me, Naomi said, her voice steady despite her hammering heart. Could you repeat that? Facing Mrs. Brown, please. She needs to see your lips to understand. Margaret turned slowly, her expression arctic. I beg your pardon? Mrs. Brown is deaf. She reads lips. She can't understand you if you don't face her when you speak. The silence that followed was crushing. Margaret's face cycled through several emotions, surprise, embarrassment, anger, before settling on cold professionalism. Of course. She turned to Olivia, spoke slowly and clearly, her lips exaggerated in a way that was almost insulting. Lunch, 1 p.m., with business associates. You need to change into something appropriate. Olivia nodded, her expression carefully neutral, and headed toward her quarters. Naomi started to follow, but Margaret's voice stopped her. A word, please. Once Olivia was out of earshot, Margaret turned the full force of her disapproval on Naomi. I understand you've been given additional responsibilities regarding Mrs. Brown. That's fine. Mr. Brown's orders supersede everything. But do not presume to correct me in front of other staff or Mrs. Brown herself. I've been managing this household for 12 years. I know what I'm doing. With respect, ma'am, you clearly don't know how to communicate with someone who's deaf, and it's making Mrs. Brown's life harder than it needs to be. Mrs. Brown has her hearing aids. She can hear perfectly well when she chooses to use them. That's not how hearing loss works. Enough! Margaret's voice was sharp enough to cut. You've been here 3 weeks. I've been here 12 years. You're a maid who got lucky, not a medical expert. Remember your place. My place. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications about class and race and hierarchy. Naomi felt her jaw tighten, felt the familiar anger that had gotten her in trouble in foster homes and entry-level jobs, the anger that came from being dismissed, from being told to know her place. But she thought about Olivia, about the $1,400 a week, about the fact that getting fired wouldn't help anyone. Yes, ma'am, she said, the words tasting like ash. Margaret nodded, satisfied, and swept away with her tablet and her certainty that she was right about everything. Naomi stood in the hallway, shaking with suppressed fury, and wondered how long she could last in a house where kindness was seen as insubordination and where basic human decency was considered overstepping boundaries. Upstairs, in her dressing room, Olivia changed into an appropriate dress for a business lunch she didn't want to attend with people who wouldn't talk to her anyway. She caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror, elegant, expensive, empty, and for a moment she barely recognized the woman staring back. 3 months ago, she would have worn this dress and played her part perfectly, would have smiled and nodded and been the perfect Mafia wife, decorative and silent. But 3 months ago, she'd also had hope that things would get better, that her hearing might return, or that people would adjust, or that something would change. Now she knew better. Nothing was going to change unless she made it change. And maybe, just maybe, Naomi Robinson was the catalyst she'd been waiting for. She finished dressing and headed downstairs, steeling herself for another lunch spent invisible at her own table. But this time at least, she knew someone saw her, and sometimes that was enough to keep fighting. The business lunch was exactly as terrible as Olivia had anticipated. 6 men in expensive suits sitting around the dining room table that could seat 20, discussing deals and territories and matters that she wasn't supposed to understand even when she could hear. Michael sat at the head of the table, commanding the room with the ease of someone born to power, and Olivia sat to his right, the perfect accessory in her perfect dress, smiling at appropriate moments and staying silent. Naomi stood against the wall near the door. Margaret had positioned her there, explaining in clipped tones that aides should be present but unobtrusive during formal meals. From her vantage point, Naomi could see everything. The way the men ignored Olivia completely except for brief nods of acknowledgement when they arrived, the way Michael would occasionally touch her hand or shoulder as if to remind himself she was there. The way Olivia's face remained carefully neutral even as her eyes grew increasingly distant. The chef had outdone himself, course after course of food that probably cost more than Naomi made in a month, each plate a work of art that these men barely noticed as they ate and talked and laughed at jokes that Olivia couldn't hear. Naomi watched Olivia watch their mouths, trying to follow conversations that moved too fast and overlapped too much for lip reading to be effective. She saw the exact moment when Olivia gave up, when her eyes glazed over and she retreated into herself, present in body but absent in every way that mattered. One of the men, late 40s, graying at the temples, wearing a watch that probably cost more than a car, said something that made everyone laugh. Michael laughed too, then turned to Olivia as if to include her in the joke. She smiled automatically, nodding as if she understood, and Naomi saw the flash of something in Michael's eyes. Disappointment? Frustration? It was gone too quickly to identify, replaced by his usual controlled expression. The lunch dragged on for 2 hours. 2 hours of Olivia sitting perfectly still, smiling at nothing, while conversations happened around her like she was furniture. Naomi felt her anger building with each passing minute, a slow burn in her chest, that made her want to stride across the room and demand that these men acknowledge the woman they were ignoring. But she stayed silent, stayed in her place against the wall, because making a scene would only make things worse for Olivia. Finally, mercifully, the meal ended. The men stood, shook Michael's hand, nodded politely in Olivia's general direction, and filed out. Michael lingered, pulling Olivia aside, speaking to her with his hands on her shoulders. Naomi couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could see Olivia's face, the careful smile, the nod, the way she touched his chest, in a gesture that looked affectionate, but felt practiced. Michael kissed her forehead and left, already on his phone before he'd cleared the doorway. Olivia stood alone in the dining room, surrounded by the debris of an elaborate meal, and for a moment she looked so lost that Naomi's heart cracked. Then Olivia's eyes found hers across the room, and her hands moved in small private signs. "Get me out of here." Naomi crossed the distance between them quickly. "Where do you want to go?" "Anywhere. Nowhere. Just away from this." They ended up in Olivia's sitting room. The door closed against the rest of the mansion and its demands. Olivia collapsed onto the couch that never got used, kicked off her designer heels, and signed with more vehemence than Naomi had seen from her yet. "I hate this. I hate sitting there like a mannequin while they conduct business around me. I used to be part of conversations. I used to contribute something. Now I'm just decoration. Did you tell Michael how you feel? What's the point? He'll just say I don't have to attend if it bothers me. But if I don't attend, I'm abandoning him. I'm not being supportive. I'm letting him down." Olivia's hands moved faster now, the signs sharp with frustration. "There's no winning. Either I sit there and feel invisible, or I stay away and feel guilty. That's not fair to you." "Fair?" Olivia's laugh had no sound, but her expression conveyed bitter amusement. "Nothing about this life is fair. I married a man who built his empire on violence and intimidation. I knew what I was getting into. I just didn't know I'd lose myself in the process." Naomi sat beside her, trying to find words or signs that might help. But what could she say? She had no experience with marriage, no understanding of the particular prison that Olivia inhabited. All she had was her own history of feeling invisible, of being overlooked, and the bone-deep conviction that nobody should have to live like this. "Tell me something," Olivia signed after a long silence. "If you could be anywhere right now, doing anything, what would it be?" The question caught Naomi off guard. Nobody had asked her about her dreams in years. "I don't know, somewhere warm maybe, with actual heat that works, doing something that matters." "What matters to you?" "Helping people, I guess. Seeing people. Really seeing them, the way I saw you. The way Jasmine saw me." Naomi paused, surprised by her own honesty. "I spent my whole childhood being invisible. Nobody really looked at me. Not the foster parents who took me in for the checks, not the social workers who saw me as a case file, not the teachers who wrote me off as another system kid who wouldn't amount to anything. Jasmine was the only person who made me feel like I existed, like I mattered, and I guess I want to do that for other people." "You're doing it for me," Olivia signed, her movements gentle. "You have no idea what it means to have someone actually talk to me, to see me as a person instead of a problem. I'm just signing with you. That's not exactly revolutionary. It is to me." Olivia stood, paced to the window, stared out at the gardens. "You know what the worst part of losing my hearing was? Not the silence, not even the isolation. It was watching people give up on me, watching them decide I was too much work, too complicated, too difficult. They didn't want to learn sign language or speak more clearly or face me when they talked. They wanted the old Olivia back, the one who could hear and function normally and not require any special accommodation. And when they couldn't have her, they just stepped back, left me in this bubble of silence and gave up. Not everyone gave up. No, Christina didn't. My sister fought for me right up until the car accident killed her. And now you're fighting for me, and you barely know me, and you have absolutely no reason to get involved in this mess." "Maybe that's exactly why I can help," Naomi signed. "I'm not part of this world. I don't have history here. I can see things clearly because I'm outside looking in. And what do you see? Naomi considered this carefully, knowing that honesty might hurt, but lies would help no one. I see a woman who's forgotten she has choices, who's let herself be convinced that this is all there is. But you have choices, Olivia. Maybe not easy ones, maybe not safe ones, but you're not as trapped as you think you are. What choices? Olivia's hands demanded. Leave Michael. Go where? Do what? I have no career anymore, no independence, no life outside this mansion. Everything I have is because of him. Everything I am is defined by being his wife. That's not true. You were someone before him. You can be someone again. Can I? The vulnerability in Olivia's face was heartbreaking. I don't even remember who that person was anymore. Before Naomi could respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Margaret. Kitchen now. I have to go, Naomi signed reluctantly. Margaret's summoning me. Of course she is. Olivia's smile was wan. Thank you for listening, for seeing me. Even if nothing changes, it helps to know someone understands. Things can change, if you want them to. Maybe. But Olivia looked doubtful, and Naomi left the sitting room with a heaviness in her chest that felt like borrowed grief. Margaret was waiting in the kitchen, her expression promising nothing good. The chef was prepping for dinner, pointedly ignoring whatever was about to happen, his knife work on vegetables aggressive and precise. We need to establish some boundaries, Margaret said without preamble. Your job is to assist Mrs. Brown, not to become her confidant. I understand she's lonely, and I understand you have a useful skill in sign language, but you need to remember your place. There were those words again. Your place. As if Naomi had been born into a specific slot in the world's hierarchy and had no business trying to climb out of it. I'm doing exactly what Mr. Brown asked me to do, Naomi said evenly. Help Mrs. Brown feel less isolated. There's a difference between helping and overstepping. You've been here 3 weeks. You don't know Mrs. Brown, you don't understand the dynamics of this household, and you certainly aren't qualified to give her advice about her life or her marriage. I haven't given her any advice about her marriage. Haven't you? Margaret's eyes were sharp. I saw how you looked during that lunch, judgmental, disapproving. You need to understand something. Mrs. Brown's life is complicated in ways you can't possibly comprehend. Her marriage is not your concern. Her happiness is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to clean, to assist when called upon, and to stay in your lane. Am I making myself clear? Crystal clear. Margaret was warning her off, establishing territory, making sure Naomi knew that friendship with Olivia came with limits and surveillance. Yes, ma'am. Good. Now the pool house needs attention. The Browns are hosting a party this weekend, business associates and their wives. Everything needs to be perfect. Get started. Naomi took her supplies and headed to the pool house, a structure that could have been a standalone home anywhere else, but served as a glorified changing room here. As she cleaned, she thought about Margaret's warning, about the careful balance she was trying to maintain, about the fact that she was getting paid $1,400 a week to be both friend and employee to a woman trapped in a gilded cage. What would you do if you discovered your only friend was in a situation they couldn't escape? Would you risk everything to help them, or would you protect yourself first? Drop your thoughts below. The rest of Thursday and all of Friday passed in a careful dance. Naomi performed her cleaning duties flawlessly, stayed professional when Margaret was watching, and found stolen moments to talk with Olivia when they were alone. They developed a system. When other staff were present, Naomi was the perfect aide, attentive, quiet, unobtrusive. When they were alone, she was a friend, honest, engaged, fully present. It was exhausting maintaining the dual roles, but it was also exhilarating. Naomi felt useful in a way she never had before. Not just useful, necessary. Olivia was coming alive again, becoming more animated, more engaged with the world. She started asking questions about current events, about books Naomi had read, about life outside the mansion walls. She started laughing again, real laughter that transformed her face and made her look 10 years younger. Michael noticed. On Friday afternoon, he found Naomi in the hallway outside his office and pulled her aside. "You're good for her," he said without preamble. "She's happier, more like herself." "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing." He paused, and something in his expression shifted, became harder, more dangerous. "But understand this. My wife's well-being is everything to me. Everything. If anything happened to upset her, to hurt her, I would be very displeased. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Naomi understood perfectly. He was threatening her while pretending to praise her. Classic power move. "I would never hurt Mrs. Brown, sir. She's become important to me." "Good, keep it that way." He studied her for another moment, then nodded and returned to his office, the door closing with quiet finality. Naomi stood in the hallway, her heart racing, and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. Michael's warning had been clear. Olivia was off limits in any way that might cause harm. But what constituted harm? Friendship? Honesty? Helping Olivia see that she had options beyond this mansion and this marriage? Saturday arrived with chaos. The party was that evening, and the entire household was in preparation mode. Margaret was everywhere at once, directing staff like a general coordinating troops, her stress levels visible in her increasingly curt commands. The chef had brought in help from outside, and the kitchen was a storm of culinary activity. Florists arrived with arrangements that probably cost more than Naomi's monthly rent. A string quartet set up in the living room to provide ambient music that nobody would really listen to. Olivia was getting ready in her quarters, and Naomi had been assigned to help her, a task that felt more personal than professional. She found Olivia standing in front of her closet, staring at a sea of expensive dresses with an expression of pure dread. "I don't want to do this," Olivia signed. "I don't want to stand around being decorative while Michael networks and everyone ignores me." "Then don't." "What, don't go? Tell Michael you're not feeling well. Stay upstairs. You don't have to perform if you don't want to. He needs me there. It looks bad if I don't attend. He needs a wife who's miserable and invisible? That seems like a bad look too." Olivia stared at her, and Naomi could see the war happening behind her eyes. Duty versus desire, obligation versus self-preservation. "I can't just not show up. That's not how this works." "Then show up differently. Be present on your terms, not theirs." "What does that even mean?" Naomi thought fast, an idea forming. "It means you engage on your own terms. You have me now. I can be your interpreter. When people talk to you, I can sign what they're saying. You can actually participate in conversations instead of standing there pretending to understand. Take back some control. Michael won't like that. He doesn't want attention drawn to my hearing loss. He thinks it makes us look weak. Screw what Michael wants." Naomi signed it boldly, recklessly, knowing she was overstepping but unable to stop herself. "What do you want?" Olivia looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Then she signed with more determination than Naomi had seen from her. "I want to exist at my own party. I want to be more than furniture. I want to matter. Then let's make it happen." They chose a dress together, deep emerald green that made Olivia's skin glow and her eyes spark with fire. Naomi helped with hair and makeup, tasks that felt intimate and strange, bridging the gap between employee and friend in ways that were probably inappropriate but felt right. As she worked, they talked about strategy, how Naomi would position herself near Olivia during the party, how she would subtly sign conversations, how Olivia could engage with guests in ways that felt authentic rather than performative. By the time Olivia was ready, she looked stunning, but more than that, she looked alive, ready to fight for space in her own life. The party started at 7 p.m., and by 7:30 the mansion was full of people who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine spread on wealth and power. Men in $1,000 suits, women in designer dresses, everyone dripping with the casual confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. Naomi circulated with a tray of champagne. Margaret had conscripted all available staff to serve, and watched the dynamics play out. Michael was in his element, moving through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and laughing at jokes and conducting business disguised as social conversation. And beside him, for the first time, Olivia wasn't just standing silently. She was engaging. When someone spoke to her, Naomi would drift closer with her tray, positioning herself so Olivia could see her hands signing the conversation. It was subtle, Careful, but it worked. Olivia could respond appropriately, could laugh at actual jokes instead of fake laughing at nothing, could ask questions and contribute observations. She was participating in her own life, and the change was visible. People started actually talking to her instead of around her, started including her in conversations instead of treating her like decoration. And Michael noticed. Naomi saw his expression shift from his usual controlled mask to something else, surprise maybe, or concern. He watched Olivia charm one of his business associates, watched her laugh genuinely at something the man's wife said, watched her come alive in a way she hadn't in months. Then his eyes found Naomi, standing nearby with her tray, and his gaze sharpened with understanding. The party continued for hours, but Naomi felt Michael's attention on her like a physical weight. He was watching, calculating, trying to decide if this development was good or dangerous. She couldn't tell which way he'd land, and the uncertainty made her palms sweat despite the mansion's perfect climate control. Around 10 p.m., she was in the kitchen refilling her champagne tray when someone grabbed her arm. She spun, heart leaping, and found herself face to face with one of Michael's associates, the man with the expensive watch from Thursday's lunch. "You're the one helping Mrs. Brown," he said. Not a question, an accusation. "I'm her aide, yes. Smart move, Mr. Brown, making that arrangement. Wife's much more present tonight." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You know sign language, huh? That's a useful skill, very useful." Something in his tone set off alarm bells. "I suppose so. Ever think about putting it to use elsewhere? I know people who'd pay good money for someone who can move quietly through houses, who people trust, who knows sign language. Great for silent communication, you know. Very discreet." Naomi's blood ran cold. He was recruiting her, trying to turn her into a spy or worse. "I'm happy where I am," she said firmly. Sure, but if that ever changes..." He pulled out a business card, pressed it into her hand. "Think about it. Everyone needs a backup plan in this business." He walked away, leaving Naomi standing in the kitchen with a business card that felt radioactive in her palm. She looked at it. Vincent Caruso, import-export. The kind of vague description that meant exactly what it sounded like. Illegal operations disguised as legitimate business. She shoved the card in her pocket and tried to forget about it, but the interaction had rattled her. She'd been so focused on helping Olivia that she hadn't considered how her position might look to others, how it might be interpreted or exploited. The party finally wound down after midnight. Guests departed in a parade of expensive cars and empty promises to do lunch. Staff cleaned up the debris of excessive celebration. And Olivia, exhausted but glowing, found Naomi in the conservatory where she'd gone to catch her breath. "Thank you," Olivia signed, her movements emphatic. "Tonight I felt like myself again, like a person instead of a prop. Thank you. You did that yourself. I just helped translate. No, you gave me back my voice. You helped me exist again." Olivia paused, then, "Michael wasn't happy. I noticed. He'll say something tomorrow. About drawing attention, about making my hearing loss public, about how we need to keep things quiet. What will you tell him?" "The truth." Olivia's hands moved with determination. "That I'm tired of being invisible. That I need this. That you're helping me in ways he never could. That might not go over well, probably not." Olivia smiled, tired but genuine. "But I'm done living my life according to what other people want. Even Michael. Especially Michael." She left to go find her husband, to face whatever conversation was waiting, and Naomi watched her go with a mixture of pride and dread. She'd helped Olivia find her voice again, but in this house, in this world, having a voice could be dangerous. And Naomi had the sinking feeling that the real battles were just beginning. Upstairs in his study, Michael Brown sat behind his desk and thought about his wife's transformation tonight, about the way she'd come alive with the help of a 25-year-old maid who'd been working for him less than a month, about the way Olivia had looked at that maid, grateful, trusting, dependent. He thought about Vincent Caruso's interest in Naomi Robinson, about the business card he'd seen Vincent press into her hand, about the fact that Vincent worked for the Marchetti family, his biggest rivals, and wouldn't recruit randomly. He pulled up the background check his people had run on Naomi when she was first hired. Standard procedure for anyone working in his home. Foster care, no family, no connections, financially struggling, clean record, nothing suspicious. But maybe that was the point. Maybe she was perfect precisely because she looked so innocent. He made another note on his phone. Deep background check on Naomi Robinson, everything, and monitor all interactions with Olivia. Then he closed his laptop and went to face his wife, who was standing in their bedroom doorway with an expression that said she was ready for a fight. Some battles, Michael thought, were inevitable. The question was always the same. Who would win, and what would it cost? Sunday morning arrived with the kind of silence that felt ominous. Naomi had the day off, her first in 9 days. But she couldn't shake the tension that had wrapped around her like a shroud after Saturday's party. She sat in her apartment, nursing cheap coffee and staring at Vincent Caruso's business card, which she'd placed on her tiny kitchen table like it was evidence in a crime she hadn't committed yet. She should throw it away, should forget the conversation ever happened. But something made her hesitate, some instinct honed by years of surviving in systems that didn't care about her. The card represented options even if those options were dangerous, and in her experience, having options, even bad ones, was better than having none at all. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Olivia, got your number from payroll records, hope that's okay, can we talk tomorrow?" Naomi stared at the message, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. Olivia had her personal number now, had reached out outside the mansion's walls. This was another boundary crossed, another line blurred between professional and personal. She texted back, "Of course. Everything okay?" The response came quickly. "Michael and I had a fight. A big one. I'll tell you tomorrow. Thank you for last night. You changed something in me." Naomi read the message 3 times, trying to decode the implications. A big fight. About what? About her? About Olivia's newfound voice? About the way she'd come alive at the party? She wanted to ask more, but some conversations couldn't happen over text. So she simply replied, "I'm here whenever you need me." The rest of Sunday crawled by. Naomi cleaned her apartment, all 40 minutes of it, did laundry at the building's sketchy basement machines, and tried to distract herself with a book she'd checked out from the library. But her mind kept drifting back to the mansion, to Olivia, to the feeling that she'd set something in motion that she couldn't control. Mrs. Chen's opera woke her at 6 a.m. Monday, right on schedule. Naomi got ready for work with a sense of foreboding she couldn't shake, like walking toward a cliff in the dark. The bus ride up the hill felt longer than usual, each stop a delay before whatever was waiting for her at the Brown mansion. Margaret was in the kitchen when she arrived, but her usual sharp efficiency was replaced by something that looked almost like uncertainty. She handed Naomi her schedule without the typical lecture about punctuality or standards. "Mrs. Brown has requested you join her for breakfast in the conservatory at 8, Margaret said, her tone carefully neutral. "After that, your regular duties. The Marchetti family is visiting on Wednesday, business dinner, so we'll need the formal dining room prepared to perfection." The Marchetti family, Vincent Caruso's employers. Naomi's stomach dropped. "Yes, ma'am." She had an hour before breakfast with Olivia, so she started on the second-floor guest rooms, stripping beds and scrubbing bathrooms with mechanical precision while her mind raced. A big fight with Michael, the Marchettis coming for dinner, Vincent's recruitment attempt. All the pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite see the shape of yet. At 8 a.m. sharp, she made her way to the conservatory. Olivia was already there, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, a far cry from her usual carefully curated appearance. Her hair was in a messy bun, and she wore no makeup. She looked younger, more real and exhausted in a way that suggested she hadn't slept much. "Good morning," Naomi signed as she entered. Olivia's smile was wan, but genuine. "Good morning. Thank you for coming. I needed to talk to someone who isn't part of all this." She gestured vaguely at the mansion around them. They sat at the small wrought-iron table where breakfast had been laid out. Fruit, pastries, coffee, that smelled significantly better than anything Naomi could afford. Olivia poured them both coffee, and the domestic normalcy of the gesture felt surreal. "Tell me what happened," Naomi signed. Olivia's hands moved slowly at first, then faster as the story poured out. After the party, Michael pulled me aside. He was angry, not shouting angry, but that cold, controlled anger that's somehow worse. He said I'd embarrassed him by making my hearing loss so public, said it made us look weak, vulnerable, said his associates would see it as something they could exploit. "That's ridiculous. You were just participating in conversations." "I know, that's what I told him," and he said, Olivia's hands paused, trembling slightly. He said, "I need to understand that everything I do reflects on him, that I'm not just Olivia anymore, I'm Mrs. Michael Brown, and that comes with responsibilities, with expectations." "What did you say?" I told him I'm tired of being an accessory, that I need to exist as my own person, that having you help me communicate doesn't make us weak, it makes us human. Her smile was bitter. He didn't take that well. He said, "You're becoming a problem, that you're giving me ideas above my station." Naomi felt her blood run cold. Above your station. You're his wife, not his employee. In his world, everyone has a role. Everyone serves a purpose in relation to him, and wives are supposed to support, not challenge. Olivia's eyes filled with tears that she blinked back furiously. We argued for hours. I said things I've been holding back for months, years maybe, about feeling trapped, about losing myself, about how the bomb didn't just take my hearing, it showed me how conditional everyone's love really was, how quickly people gave up when I became inconvenient. Not everyone gave up, no, Christina didn't, and now you haven't. But Michael... Olivia's hands faltered, searching for signs that could capture complicated emotions. Michael loves me, but it's a possessive love, a controlling love. He wants to protect me, but his version of protection means keeping me locked away, dependent, voiceless, and I finally told him that's not enough anymore, that I need more than safety. I need to matter. How did he respond? He left, just walked out, slept in his office, and this morning he was gone before I woke up. Left a note saying we'd talk tonight, after he handles some business. Olivia's laugh had no sound, but plenty of bitterness. That's very Michael. Deal with the business first, handle the emotional crisis when it's convenient. Naomi reached across the table, took Olivia's hand, squeezed it in solidarity. "I'm sorry. This is my fault. If I hadn't pushed you to engage at the party..." "No." Olivia's hands were emphatic when she pulled back to sign. "Don't apologize for helping me find my voice again. Don't apologize for treating me like a person. This fight was coming whether you were here or not. You just accelerated it, made it impossible to ignore anymore. What happens now?" "I don't know." The vulnerability in Olivia's expression was heartbreaking. "For the first time in our marriage, I don't know what happens next. And that's terrifying, but it's also freeing. Is that crazy?" "No. Uncertainty is scary, but at least it means possibilities. When everything's controlled, you're just going through motions." "Exactly." Olivia sipped her coffee, staring out at the gardens. "Tell me something. How do you do it? How do you survive with no safety net? No family, no backup plan, just yourself?" "Honestly, I don't always survive well. I scrape by, I make do. But I'm free in ways you aren't. Nobody controls my choices, even if my choices are limited by money and circumstances. At least they're mine. I want that freedom, even if it means less security. That's easy to say when you've always had security, harder to live. Teach me." Olivia's hands moved urgently. "Teach me how to stand on my own, how to exist without depending on Michael's money and power and protection." Naomi stared at her, recognizing the dangerous territory they were entering. This wasn't just friendship anymore. This was something bigger, more complicated. This was Olivia asking her to help dismantle a marriage, to support a potential escape from a man who cleaned guns in his study and had business associates who recruited spies. "That's a big ask," Naomi signed carefully, "and potentially dangerous. For both of us." "I know. And you can say no. You should probably say no, but I'm asking anyway because you're the only person who sees me as something other than Michael Brown's wife. You see Olivia. Just Olivia. And I need someone to help me figure out who that person is. Before Naomi could respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, saw a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. About opportunities. About protection. Vincent. She stared at the message, her mind racing. Vincent Caruso reaching out directly. Why now? Had Michael mentioned something to the Marchettis? Was this connected to the upcoming dinner? What's wrong? Olivia signed, noticing her expression. Nothing. Just work stuff. Naomi shoved the phone back in her pocket, not ready to explain Vincent's interest or what it might mean. They finished breakfast with lighter conversation, Olivia asking about books Naomi had read, movies she'd seen, small glimpses into a life outside the mansion's walls. But the weight of their earlier conversation hung between them, a decision point that would determine the trajectory of both their lives. Around 10 a.m., Margaret appeared in the conservatory doorway, her expression pinched with disapproval that she was clearly trying to mask as professionalism. "Mrs. Brown!" Mr. Brown called. "He'll be home late tonight, after 9. He asked that you wait up for him." Margaret's eyes cut to Naomi. "And you, the formal dining room needs attention. The Marchettis are particular about details." The Marchettis again. Naomi nodded, gathered the breakfast dishes, and headed toward the kitchen. As she walked away, she felt Olivia's eyes on her back and wondered if they'd both just committed to something neither of them fully understood yet. The formal dining room was a study in excessive elegance, hand-carved mahogany table that seated 20, chairs upholstered in fabric that probably cost more per yard than Naomi's monthly rent, walls lined with artwork that might have been museum quality if it wasn't hanging in a mobster's house. She cleaned methodically, polishing wood until it gleamed, adjusting place settings with precision that would have made Margaret proud. She was checking the crystal glasses for spots when someone cleared their throat behind her. Michael Brown stood in the doorway, perfectly composed in another $1,000 suit, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Brown." Naomi's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "I didn't realize you were home." "I wasn't. I came back." He moved into the room, his presence somehow making the massive space feel smaller. "We need to talk. About my wife." Here it was, the confrontation she'd been dreading. "Sir, I want you to know that I would never do anything to hurt Mrs. Brown or cause problems in your marriage." "Stop." Michael's voice was quiet, but commanding. "I'm not here to fire you or threaten you. I'm here to understand what's happening." Naomi waited, not trusting herself to speak. "My wife is changing," Michael continued, his words measured. "She's becoming bolder, more defiant, more independent. And I need to know if that's because you're encouraging her to leave me." "I'm not—" "Let me finish." He moved closer, and Naomi fought the urge to step back. "Olivia is everything to me, everything. I've built an empire, made more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But none of it matters if she's not okay, do you understand that?" "Yes, sir. After the bombing, I thought I'd lose her, not just to death, though that was a very real possibility, but to the depression that followed. She disappeared into herself, became a ghost in our own home, and I didn't know how to reach her because I can't—" He paused, and for a moment his controlled mask slipped, showing something raw underneath. "I can't speak her language anymore, literally. She needs sign language and I don't have time to learn it properly. I have a business empire to run, enemies to manage, deals to close. I can't take months off to become fluent in ASL. With respect, sir, you could hire a tutor, learn gradually, make time. I know what I could do." The snap in his voice made Naomi flinch. Michael caught himself, took a breath, reset his expression. "I know. And the fact that I haven't is one more failure in a long list. But then you appeared, and suddenly Olivia was smiling again, engaging again, coming back to life. And I was grateful. Am grateful. But last night, at the party, I saw something that worried me." "What did you see?" "I saw my wife relying on you more than she relies on me. I saw her looking at you like you're her lifeline, and I realized that I've been so focused on keeping her safe that I've made her prisoner, and now she's found a key to her cell, and that key is you." The metaphor was apt and uncomfortable. Naomi didn't know what to say to that level of self-awareness from a man who she'd assumed operated purely on power and control. "Mrs. Brown just wants to be seen," Naomi said carefully, "to be treated like a person instead of a problem. I'm not trying to replace you or turn her against you. I'm just talking to her in a language she can understand." "And what are you talking about?" "Books, movies, her past, her sister, normal things that people discuss when they're getting to know each other." "Not about leaving, not about divorce, not about how terrible I am?" "No, sir, though she is unhappy. You should know that." Michael's jaw tightened. "I know. I knew before last night, but I've been avoiding dealing with it because I don't know how to fix it. I can't make her hearing come back. I can't undo the isolation. And apparently I can't even have a proper conversation with my own wife without a translator. You could learn sign language, really learn it. Not just a few phrases, but actual fluency. Show her that she matters enough to change your life for." "I don't have time. You have time for business meetings and parties and running an empire, but you don't have time to learn how to talk to your wife?" Naomi knew she was overstepping, knew this could get her fired or worse, but the words kept coming. "That's a choice, Mr. Brown. You're choosing your business over her, and she knows it. She feels it every day." The silence that followed was crushing. Michael stared at her with an expression that cycled through anger, surprise, and something that might have been respect. "You're either very brave or very stupid," he said finally, "talking to me like that." "Probably both, sir." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "My wife chose her ally well. You have spine." The smile faded. "But here's what you need to understand. My business isn't separate from our lives. It is our life. The money that pays for this house, for Olivia's care, for your salary. It comes from deals and negotiations and sometimes violence. The enemies I have don't distinguish between me and my wife. She's a target because she's mine. And if she leaves me, if she tries to live independently, she becomes an even bigger target. Because divorced wives know secrets, and secrets are leverage." The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Michael wasn't just saying Olivia couldn't leave because he loved her. He was saying she couldn't leave because it would be dangerous for her and possibly for anyone who helped her. "So what are you telling me?" Naomi asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm telling you to help my wife. Make her happy. Give her the friendship and connection she needs, but don't encourage her to leave. Because if she leaves, I can't protect her, and the people who want to hurt me will use her to do it. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Good." Michael moved toward the door, then paused. "The Marchettis are coming Wednesday. Vincent Caruso works for them. If he approaches you again, tells you anything, offers you anything, you tell me immediately. Vincent is dangerous, and if he's interested in you, it's not for good reasons. How did you— I know everything that happens in my house. Everything, including business cards being passed in my kitchen." His expression hardened. "Vincent recruits people, turns them into assets for the Marchettis. He's probably already run your background, found out you have no family, no connections, nothing to lose. That makes you perfect for what he does. Finds vulnerable people and gives them money and protection in exchange for information and loyalty. I'm not interested in whatever he's offering. Maybe not now, but everyone has a price, Naomi. Everyone. And men like Vincent are very good at finding it." He moved to leave again, then added over his shoulder, "Dinner Wednesday, you'll serve. Stay close to Olivia. Help her participate. But pay attention to Vincent. I need to know what angle he's working." Then he was gone, leaving Naomi standing in the formal dining room with crystal glasses in her hands and the weight of impossible expectations on her shoulders. She was supposed to be Olivia's friend, Michael's employee, not Vincent's recruit, not a spy for anyone, just a maid who happened to know sign language. But in this world, Michael's world, nothing was ever that simple. Every action had consequences. Every relationship had ulterior motives. Every friendship could be weaponized. Her phone buzzed again. Vincent. Wednesday dinner. We'll talk after. Important opportunities for someone in your position. Naomi stared at the message, then at the gleaming dining room table where dangerous people would sit in 2 days and play games she didn't fully understand. She thought about Olivia asking her to teach her how to be free, about Michael asking her to keep Olivia safe by keeping her trapped, about Vincent offering opportunities that would probably destroy her. She thought about her tiny apartment with its broken heating and her $1,400 a week that had seemed like salvation but was starting to feel like chains. And she realized that she'd done exactly what she'd promised herself she'd never do. She'd gotten involved. Not just involved, entangled, caught in the web of the Brown family's complicated dynamics, unable to extricate herself without causing damage. The question was no longer whether she could help Olivia without consequences. The question was which consequences she was willing to accept, and who would pay the price when everything inevitably fell apart. Upstairs, Olivia sat in her sitting room and stared at the photograph of her and Christina at the beach, both of them frozen in a moment of uncomplicated happiness. She thought about the fight with Michael, about the things she'd said that couldn't be unsaid, about Naomi's offer to teach her how to stand alone. She thought about freedom and what it might cost, about whether love that required her silence was really love at all, about whether she had the courage to choose herself over security. Her phone lit up with a message from Michael. "We'll talk tonight, I love you. Please remember that whatever happens, I love you." Olivia read it 3 times, hearing the subtext beneath the words. "I love you, but I won't change. I love you, but I need you to stay. I love you, but on my terms, not yours." She replied simply, "I love you too, but love isn't enough anymore. We both need to accept that." Then she turned off her phone and sat in the silence that had become her constant companion, wondering if she was brave enough to trade security for possibility, or if fear would keep her trapped in this beautiful prison forever. Outside, the November sky darkened with approaching rain, and the Brown mansion settled into its usual rhythms, staff working, Michael strategizing, Olivia isolated, and Naomi caught in the middle of something that was about to get significantly more complicated. Wednesday was coming. The Marchettis were coming. Vincent Caruso was coming. And nobody, not Michael with his control, not Olivia with her newfound voice, not Naomi with her good intentions, was prepared for what would happen when all the carefully maintained facades finally cracked and the truth underneath was exposed for everyone to see. The storm was brewing, the pieces were moving, and the only certainty was that when it finally broke, nothing would ever be the same again. Tuesday passed in a fog of tension that seemed to permeate every corner of the mansion. Naomi went through her duties mechanically, polishing, scrubbing, arranging, while her mind spun through the impossible equation she'd been handed. Help Olivia find herself, but don't encourage her to leave. Be her friend, but remember your staff. Stay close to Michael's wife, but watch his enemies. The contradictions were making her dizzy. She barely saw Olivia all day. Michael had apparently returned late Monday night, and whatever conversation they'd had kept them both sequestered in separate parts of the mansion. Michael in his office, door closed, voice occasionally audible through the heavy wood as he conducted business. Olivia in her quarters, doing God knew what, maybe reading, maybe crying, maybe planning her next move. Margaret was wound tighter than usual, barking orders about Wednesday's dinner, with a manic energy that suggested she knew the Marchetti visit was more than just a social call. The chef brought in additional help and began preparations that looked more like military operations than meal planning. Extra security appeared, men in dark suits with earpieces who positioned themselves strategically around the property. Whatever was happening Wednesday, it was big. Naomi was restocking linens in the second-floor closet when her phone buzzed. Olivia. "Can you come to the conservatory? Need to talk." She found Olivia standing by the windows, watching the gardeners work on the grounds below. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy, but she'd composed herself by the time Naomi entered. "Are you okay?" Naomi signed. "No." Olivia's honesty was startling. But I will be, eventually. Maybe. She moved to their usual bench and Naomi joined her. Michael and I talked last night. For hours. Really talked for the first time in months. And he wants me to stay. Obviously. He apologized for not learning sign language, for letting me become isolated, for treating me like a problem instead of a person. He promised to do better. Olivia's hands moved slowly, each sign weighted with exhaustion. And I believe him. He means it in this moment. But Michael has meant a lot of things over the years, and then his business takes over and his promises get forgotten. So, I don't know if this time is different, or if this is just another cycle. What do you want? I want to believe him. I want to believe we can fix this. But I also want more. I want to exist outside this house. I want to work again, use my languages, contribute something to the world. And when I mentioned that, Michael got very quiet, very controlled, and said we'd discuss it after Wednesday's dinner, after his business with the Marchettis is settled. Always after. Always when it's convenient for him. Exactly. Olivia's smile was bitter. But here's the thing. I'm starting to realize that waiting for the right time means waiting forever. Because there will always be another deal, another threat, another reason why now isn't good. So I need to start making moves that don't require his permission. Naomi felt alarm bells going off in her head. What kind of moves? Small ones, like updating my resume, reaching out to old contacts in the translation world, seeing what opportunities might exist, not leaving, not yet, but preparing, having options. Is that crazy? It's smart, but it's also dangerous if Michael finds out before you're ready. I know. That's why I need your help. Olivia's expression was earnest, pleading. I need someone I can trust to help me navigate this. Someone who isn't part of Michael's world. Someone who sees me as Olivia, not Mrs. Brown. Olivia, I know I'm asking a lot. I know this puts you in an impossible position, but you're the only person I have, the only friend, and I promise, whatever happens, I'll protect you. I won't let Michael blame you or punish you for helping me. You can't promise that. You don't control what Michael does any more than I do. Then I'll make sure you have money, a safety net. If this goes wrong, if I have to leave, or if Michael fires you, or if everything falls apart, I'll make sure you're taken care of. The offer was tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Financial security in exchange for helping Olivia escape a marriage that was slowly suffocating her. It sounded noble, romantic even, like something from a movie. But Naomi had lived long enough to know that real life was messier than movies, and people with good intentions often ended up destroyed by circumstances they couldn't control. Let me think about it, Naomi signed. This is big, and Wednesday's dinner might change things. Let's see what happens there first. The Marchettis. Olivia's expression darkened. Michael's been tense about this dinner all week. Says it's important negotiations, but I think it's more than that. I think there's something dangerous happening, something he's not telling me about. Do you know anything about them? The Marchettis. Just that they're Michael's biggest competition. They control territory on the east side, and there's been tension between the families for years. Usually they maintain a careful peace, but lately... Olivia's hands paused, searching. Lately, Michael's been more paranoid, more suspicious. He's increased security, changed his routines. Something's shifted in the balance of power, and he's worried. Before Naomi could respond, Margaret's voice echoed down the hallway. Naomi, where are you? The silver needs polishing. I have to go, Naomi signed, but we'll talk more. After Wednesday, when we know what we're really dealing with. Thank you. Olivia caught her hand briefly. For not running away, for staying even though this is messy and complicated and probably stupid. We're both probably stupid, Naomi signed with a small smile. But at least we're stupid together. She left Olivia in the conservatory and spent the rest of Tuesday polishing silver until her arms ached and her reflection stared back at her from 100 gleaming surfaces, distorted and uncertain. That night, alone in her apartment, Naomi pulled out Vincent Caruso's business card again. She'd been avoiding thinking about his offer, about what opportunities he might present, but Michael's warning kept echoing in her head. Vincent recruits people, turns them into assets, She Googled Vincent Caruso Marchetti family and fell down a rabbit hole of news articles, court documents, and speculation. Vincent was a lieutenant in the Marchetti organization, not the top, but high enough to matter. He specialized in what the articles euphemistically called intelligence gathering, which seemed to mean he recruited informants, paid off officials, and obtained information through means that probably weren't legal. And he was interested in her. Why? Her phone buzzed, making her jump. Vincent. Tomorrow night, after dinner. Meet me in the pool house at 10 p.m. Alone. Come hear what I'm offering before you decide you're not interested. Naomi stared at the message, her heart racing. Going to that meeting would be betraying Michael, but not going might mean missing information that could help her understand what she was caught in the middle of. She thought about Michael's order to tell him if Vincent approached her, thought about the security cameras and the staff who reported everything, thought about the fact that in this world everyone was playing angles, and the only person she could truly trust was herself. She didn't respond to Vincent's text, didn't commit to going, but didn't refuse either. Left her options open, the way she'd learned to do when foster families asked if she wanted to stay, and she wasn't sure yet if staying was safe. Wednesday morning arrived with unseasonably warm weather that felt wrong for late November, like nature itself was off balance. Naomi dressed carefully, her best black pants and white blouse, the closest thing she had to formal serving attire, and caught the early bus up the hill. The mansion was already buzzing with controlled chaos when she arrived. The chef's team had taken over the kitchen, preparing a menu that probably cost more than Naomi's monthly rent. Florists arranged centerpieces. The string quartet from Saturday's party was back, setting up in the living room. And Margaret was everywhere, clipboard in hand, orchestrating everything with the precision of a conductor, leading an orchestra through a complicated symphony. "You'll be serving tonight," Margaret informed Naomi when she arrived, along with Roberts and Chen from the evening staff. "Stay unobtrusive, refill glasses promptly, remove plates efficiently. The Marchettis are particular. They notice details. Don't give them anything to criticize." "Yes, ma'am." "And Mrs. Brown will be attending, obviously. You'll assist her as needed, but quietly, discreetly. This is a business dinner, not a social event. Keep the signing minimal." The subtext was clear. Don't draw attention to Olivia's disability. Don't remind everyone that Mrs. Brown was less than perfect. Naomi nodded, swallowing her anger, knowing this wasn't the time or place to argue about Olivia's right to exist visibly. She spent the morning on final preparations, ensuring every glass gleamed, every fork aligned perfectly, every detail beyond reproach. Around 3 p.m., Michael emerged from his office, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Naomi's car would have if she owned one. He looked composed, confident, but Naomi noticed the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes constantly scanned his surroundings. He was worried. And if Michael Brown was worried, everyone should be terrified. At 5 p.m., Naomi helped Olivia get ready. They didn't talk much, the weight of the evening pressing down on them both. But when Olivia was dressed in a navy blue dress that made her look elegant and untouchable, she signed quickly. "Whatever happens tonight, remember you have a choice. You don't have to do anything that makes you uncomfortable. That applies to you too," Naomi signed back. "I know, but my choices have different consequences than yours." The Marchettis arrived at 6:30 p.m. in a convoy of black SUVs that screamed money and menace. Naomi watched from the kitchen window as they emerged, 3 men and 2 women, all dressed with the kind of expensive taste that made them look like they'd stepped off a runway. The lead man was older, 60 maybe, with silver hair and the bearing of someone who'd commanded respect his entire life. That would be Antonio Marchetti, the head of the family. Beside him was Vincent Caruso, looking sharp in a charcoal suit, his eyes scanning the property with predatory awareness. When his gaze swept past the kitchen window, Naomi ducked back instinctively, her heart hammering. The dinner started at 7 p.m. sharp. Naomi, Roberts, and Chen served while the string quartet played softly in the background, a soundtrack to negotiations disguised as hospitality. She moved through the room like a ghost, refilling wine glasses and removing plates, staying invisible the way good staff were supposed to, but she watched everything. Michael and Antonio sat at opposite ends of the table, the arrangement itself a power play. They spoke with the careful courtesy of people who hated each other but needed to maintain appearances. The women, Antonio's wife and daughter Naomi eventually learned, flanked the sides, adding domestic normalcy to what was clearly a hostile negotiation. And Olivia sat near Michael, beautiful and silent, her eyes tracking conversations she could only partially follow. Naomi positioned herself nearby, ready to sign if needed, but Michael had apparently asked Olivia to remain as unobtrusive as possible. She was decoration tonight, not participant. Vincent Caruso sat directly across from Olivia, and Naomi noticed the way his attention kept drifting to her. Not to Olivia, to Naomi. He watched her move through the room with an intensity that made her skin crawl, like he was assessing merchandise, calculating value. The conversation at the table was surface-level pleasant, discussion of business generalities, market conditions, mutual acquaintances. But underneath the civility, there was tension so thick Naomi could practically taste it. This wasn't a friendly dinner. This was a battlefield, and words were the weapons. Around 8:30 during the main course, Antonio Marchetti said something that changed the atmosphere entirely. Naomi was refilling his wine glass and caught the words, "We know about the Castellano shipment. We know you moved it without consulting the commission. That's a violation of our agreement, Michael." The string quartet continued playing, oblivious. The wives kept their faces carefully neutral. But Michael's jaw tightened, and Naomi saw his hand flex against the table, the only sign of tension in his otherwise controlled demeanor. "I acted within the bounds of our territory agreements," Michael said calmly. "The shipment moved through my channels. I owed you no consultation." "That's not how Antonio sees it," Vincent interjected, his voice smooth. "When deals affect all 5 families, there's an expectation of communication, of respect. Moving forward alone suggests you don't value the partnership, or suggests I know how to run my business without a committee." The polite facade was cracking. Naomi continued serving, trying to be invisible, but her mind was racing. This wasn't just a business dinner. This was a confrontation. The Marchettis had come to challenge Michael's authority, to put him in his place or extract some kind of concession. She glanced at Olivia, who was watching the exchange with growing alarm. She couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body language, see the way the room had shifted from tense courtesy to open hostility. Naomi moved closer, signed discreetly when no one was looking. They're arguing about business. A shipment Michael moved without permission. Olivia's face paled, but she nodded slightly, processing. "Perhaps," Antonio said, setting down his fork with deliberate precision, "we should discuss this more privately after dinner, without the ladies present." It was phrased as a suggestion, but everyone recognized it as a command. The wives immediately began excusing themselves, and Olivia started to rise as well. But Michael's hand shot out, caught her wrist, gentle but firm. "My wife stays," he said quietly. "Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of her." Antonio's expression flickered with surprise, then something that might have been respect. "Very well, but perhaps the staff should give us privacy." Margaret, hovering near the kitchen door, immediately began ushering the serving staff out. Naomi started to follow, but Olivia's hand moved in a quick sign. "Stay." Michael noticed, nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Naomi stays. My wife needs her." Vincent's eyes locked onto Naomi with sharp interest. "The signing maid, how convenient." "My wife's aide," Michael corrected, his voice carrying an edge that could cut. "She helps Olivia participate in conversations. Unless you have a problem with my wife being included in business discussions." "Not at all," Antonio said smoothly. "I'm all for inclusion." The string quartet had been dismissed, and the silence that followed their departure was oppressive. Naomi stood near the doorway, trying to look professional while her heart threatened to break free from her chest. She was about to witness something staff shouldn't see, hear things she probably shouldn't know. And Vincent Caruso was watching her with an expression that suggested he knew exactly what was about to happen and had planned for her to be here. "Let's be frank," Antonio said once they were alone. "You've been expanding aggressively, Michael, moving into territories that were previously neutral. The Castellano shipment was just the latest example. You're disrupting the balance we've all worked to maintain." "I'm running my business efficiently. If others can't keep up, that's not my problem." "It becomes everyone's problem when your ambition creates instability," Vincent interjected, "when your actions invite attention from law enforcement, from federal prosecutors, from people who don't understand the delicate ecosystems we've built." "Are you threatening me?" Michael's voice was dangerously quiet. "We're reminding you," Antonio said, "that no one operates in isolation, that actions have consequences, and that the Commission expects a certain level of cooperation, of respect. And if I don't feel like cooperating—" The silence that followed was crushing. Antonio studied Michael for a long moment, then smiled, the kind of smile that promised nothing good. "Then we'd be very disappointed, and when we're disappointed, we look for new partnerships, new alliances, new ways to restore balance." His eyes flickered to Olivia, just for a second, but long enough to make his meaning clear. Michael's entire body went rigid. "If you're suggesting—" "I'm suggesting nothing, merely observing that everyone has vulnerabilities. Everyone has things they value more than business, and sometimes those things become relevant to negotiations." Naomi felt ice water flood her veins. They were threatening Olivia, not directly, not explicitly, but the implication was crystal clear: cooperate, or we'll hurt your wife. Michael stood slowly, his control visible in every measured movement. "I think this dinner is over." "Are you sure?" Vincent asked, his tone almost playful. "We haven't even gotten to dessert, and I was hoping to have a conversation with your wife's aide, compare notes on what it's like to work for the Browns, get her perspective on the household dynamics." And there it was. The real play. Vincent didn't just want to recruit Naomi, he wanted to use her as leverage, get close to Olivia through Naomi, gather information, create vulnerabilities that could be exploited. "Naomi doesn't discuss my household with outsiders," Michael said flatly. "Everyone talks, Michael, for the right price, the right pressure, the right motivation." Vincent's eyes locked onto Naomi. "Isn't that right, Naomi? Don't you sometimes wonder what it would be like to work for someone who valued you properly, who paid you what you're really worth?" Naomi's mouth went dry. Every eye in the room was on her. Michael's warning her not to respond, Olivia's frightened, Antonio's calculating, Vincent's predatory. She thought about the text message, the meeting he'd requested. This had all been planned. Get her to witness this dinner, put her in play, make her a piece on the board whether she wanted to be or not. "I'm happy where I am," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm not interested in other opportunities." "Not yet," Vincent said with a smile. "But people change their minds. Circumstances change, and when they do, I'll still be here, waiting." Antonio stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "Think about what we've discussed, Michael. You have until the end of the month to demonstrate your commitment to cooperation. After that," he shrugged eloquently, "after that we'll have to consider alternative arrangements." The Marchettis left as smoothly as they'd arrived, a convoy of black SUVs disappearing into the November night. Michael stood at the window watching them go, his body language radiating barely controlled fury. Olivia sat frozen at the table, her face pale, clearly shaken even if she hadn't heard every word. Naomi stood near the doorway, trapped between wanting to comfort Olivia and knowing she should leave them alone. Finally, Michael turned. "Olivia, upstairs. Now, we need to talk." Olivia stood, started to move toward him, then paused and looked back at Naomi. "Thank you for staying," she signed quickly. "I'll find you tomorrow." Then she was gone, following Michael up the sweeping staircase, and Naomi was alone in the formal dining room with the remains of a dinner that had just changed everything. Her phone buzzed. "Vincent, pool house, 10 p.m. Don't make me come find you." Naomi stared at the message, her hands shaking. She should tell Michael, should report the contact, be the loyal employee, stay in her lane. But she thought about Vincent's words. Everyone talks, for the right price. Thought about the way he'd looked at her, not with attraction, but with assessment, like she was a tool to be used. And she thought about Olivia upstairs, probably terrified, facing a conversation with Michael about threats and vulnerabilities, and how their lives had just become exponentially more dangerous. She checked the time. 9:47 p.m. 13 minutes until Vincent's deadline. She had a choice to make. Go to the pool house and hear what Vincent was really offering, potentially betraying Michael but gaining information. Or tell Michael about the meeting, stay loyal, and remain ignorant of what game she was actually caught in the middle of. Either choice had consequences. Either choice would change the trajectory of her life, and probably Olivia's too. Naomi stood in the formal dining room, surrounded by crystal and china and the trappings of wealth built on violence, and made her decision. She grabbed her jacket and headed toward the pool house, her heart hammering, knowing she was about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Behind her, the mansion settled into its nighttime rhythms. Staff cleaning up, Michael and Olivia having their crisis conversation, security making their rounds. And in the pool house, Vincent Caruso waited with an offer that would either save Naomi or destroy her, depending on how smart she was and how lucky she got. The game had shifted, the stakes had risen, and the maid who'd only wanted to help a lonely woman had just become a player in a war she didn't fully understand. But she was about to learn, very quickly, and what she learned would force her to decide whose side she was really on, and whether having a side at all was the biggest mistake she could make. The pool house sat at the far edge of the property, separated from the main mansion by precisely manicured gardens and a stone pathway that seemed to stretch for miles in the darkness. Naomi's footsteps echoed too loudly against the pavers, each step feeling like a countdown to a decision she couldn't take back. The security cameras tracked her movement. She could feel them, small red lights blinking in the darkness like predatory eyes. Michael would know she'd come here, would see her meeting with Vincent. Unless Vincent had somehow disabled them, which seemed both possible and terrifying. The pool house was dark, except for a single light visible through the frosted glass windows. Naomi paused at the door, her hand hovering over the handle, giving herself one last chance to turn around. To run back to the mansion, tell Michael everything, stay loyal to the man who paid her and whose wife needed her. But she thought about Antonio Marchetti's thinly veiled threats, about the way Vincent had looked at her during dinner, like she was already his, about the fact that everyone in this world seemed to know more than she did, and ignorance in a war zone got you killed. She opened the door. Vincent stood near the pool, illuminated by underwater lights that cast strange shadows across his face. He'd removed his jacket, loosened his tie, and held a glass of something amber that caught the light. He looked relaxed, confident, like a man who'd already won a game she didn't know they were playing. Naomi Robinson. He said her name like he was tasting it, testing its weight. Right on time. I appreciate punctuality. You said you had something to offer. I'm here to listen, that's all. Fair enough. He gestured to a poolside chair. Sit. This might take a while. Naomi remained standing, keeping distance between them, keeping her exit route clear. Foster care had taught her to always know where the doors were. Vincent smiled, acknowledging her caution with something that might have been respect. Smart. Don't trust easily. That's good. You'll need that instinct for what I'm about to propose. Which is? Let me start with a story. Vincent took a sip of his drink, considering his words. 5 years ago I was where you are now. Not literally, I've never been a maid, but I was on the outside looking in, watching people with power make decisions that affected my life without including me in the conversation. I was just a soldier following orders, being used as a tool by people who saw me as expendable. And now? Now I'm the one giving orders. Now I have power, money, influence, because I learned to play the game instead of letting the game play me. He set down his glass. You're in a unique position, Naomi. You have access to Michael Brown's inner circle, to his wife, to his home. You see things that others don't. You hear things, well, sign things, that nobody else can understand. That's valuable. Incredibly valuable to the right people. You want me to spy on them. I want you to be aware of your worth. Michael pays you what? 1,400 a week? I'll pay you 5,000, just for information. Casual observations about his schedule, his meetings, his mood. What Mrs. Brown tells you. What you overhear. $5,000 a week. Naomi's mind spun doing the math. 20,000 a month. 240,000 a year. That was life-changing money. That was security, freedom, independence. That was everything she'd never had. It was also blood money, paid for betraying a woman who trusted her. Why? Naomi asked, forcing her voice to stay steady. Why me specifically? There are dozens of people working in that house. People who've been there longer, who have better access. Because you're invisible, Vincent said simply. You're new, you're black, you're young, you're poor. People like the Browns don't really see people like you as threats. You're furniture to them. Useful furniture, sure, but still. Background. That makes you perfect. Nobody watches the help closely until it's too late. The casual racism in his assessment was startling in its honesty. He wasn't trying to hide his contempt for how people like Naomi were perceived. He was weaponizing it. And if I say no? Vincent's expression hardened. Then you stay a maid. You keep cleaning toilets for people who will discard you the moment you stop being useful. You stay poor, stay powerless, stay invisible. But this time, you'll be invisible while knowing you had a chance to change your circumstances and chose not to take it. That's not an answer. If I say no, what happens? Nothing. Vincent shrugged. You go back to your life. I find someone else. The world keeps turning. But here's what you need to understand. This war between the Browns and the Marchettis, it's happening whether you participate or not. People are going to get hurt. Businesses are going to be destroyed. And when the dust settles, you'll either be on the winning side with money in your pocket, or you'll be collateral damage nobody remembers. You're threatening me. I'm being realistic. You're already involved, Naomi. You became involved the moment you befriended Olivia Brown. You think Michael sees you as just a helpful aid. He sees you as leverage, as a tool, as someone he can use to keep his wife compliant and controlled. And the Marchettis see you as an opportunity, as a weakness in Michael's armor. You're on the board now. The only question is whether you play the game consciously, or whether you let others move you around like a pawn. Naomi felt her jaw tighten. He wasn't wrong. She was caught in the middle whether she wanted to be or not. But accepting Vincent's offer would make her complicit in whatever violence was coming, would make her actively betray Olivia, who'd become more than an employer, who'd become a friend. What exactly do you want to know? She asked, not committing but not refusing either. Vincent's smile widened. Smart girl. Always understand the terms before agreeing to anything. He pulled out his phone, opened what looked like a notes app. I need to know about Michael's schedule, when he's home, when he's traveling, when he's vulnerable. I need to know about his state of mind. Is he paranoid, confident, distracted? I need to know about his relationship with Olivia. Are they fighting? Are they united? Are there fractures I can exploit? And most importantly, I need to know if Olivia has any information about Michael's business operations. Does she know where he keeps records? Does she overhear conversations? Could she be convinced to provide access? You want me to turn Olivia into an unwitting informant. I want you to have conversations with your friend and report back what you learn. That's all. You're not stealing anything, not breaking any laws, just sharing information that's valuable to multiple parties. That's exactly what spying is. Call it what you want. The money spends the same regardless of terminology. Naomi's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, saw a text from Olivia. Are you okay? Michael said you left. I'm worried. The message felt like a punch to the gut. While she was standing here negotiating betrayal, Olivia was worried about her, was thinking about her well-being despite whatever crisis was happening upstairs. Vincent noticed her expression. Mrs. Brown checking on you? That's nice. She seems to care about you. Makes you wonder why she married a man who builds his empire on violence and intimidation, doesn't it? Makes you wonder what she knows, what she's complicit in, what blood is on her hands by association. She's a victim of circumstance. Is she? Vincent's tone sharpened. Or is she a woman who chose comfort and wealth over morality, who chose to look the other way while her husband hurt people, destroyed lives, built his fortune on the suffering of communities like the one you probably grew up in. You think she didn't know what Michael was when she married him? You think she's innocent?" The words hit harder than Naomi wanted to admit. She'd thought about this herself, late at night in her apartment, wondering how someone like Olivia, educated, multilingual, clearly intelligent, had ended up married to a mobster. Had she known? Had she cared? Or had the money and security been worth the moral compromise? "Even if that's true," Naomi said slowly, "it doesn't make betraying her right." "No, but it makes it easier." Vincent moved closer, and Naomi forced herself not to step back. "Here's what I think. I think you're a good person caught in a bad situation. I think you genuinely care about Olivia Brown, and that makes you hesitate. But I also think you're smart enough to recognize that good intentions don't pay rent, that caring about someone doesn't protect you when everything falls apart, and that when this war between the families gets hot, being on the losing side is a death sentence. And you're sure the Marchettis will win?" "I'm sure the Browns are overextended, paranoid, and making mistakes. Michael's expansion has made him enemies on all sides. It's only a matter of time before those enemies coordinate, and when they do..." Vincent made a gesture like something exploding. Chaos. And in chaos, the smart people position themselves to survive and profit. The stupid people die loyal to causes that don't care about them. Naomi's phone buzzed again. "Olivia, please let me know you're safe. Tonight was scary and I need to know my friend is okay." My friend. The words felt like an anchor and a noose at the same time. Friendship with Olivia had given Naomi something she'd been missing her entire life. Connection, purpose, mattering to someone. But it had also trapped her in a web of complications that threatened to destroy her. "I need time," Naomi said finally, "to think about this, to decide." "You have until Friday," Vincent said. "After that, the offer expires and I move on to other options, other people who are less squeamish about survival. And if I decide to tell Michael about this conversation..." Vincent's smile was cold. "Then you'll discover that Michael already knows. The cameras in this pool house feed directly to his security system. He's probably watching us right now, trying to figure out if you're loyal or if you're a threat. My meeting you here wasn't a secret. It was a test. For both of you." The ground seemed to shift beneath Naomi's feet. This had all been theater, a performance designed to force her hand, to make her reveal her loyalties, to create the exact kind of chaos Vincent had described. "You used me. I gave you an opportunity, and let Michael know you were considering it. Now you both get to decide what that means. Maybe he fires you for even showing up here. Maybe he doubles your salary to keep you loyal. Maybe he realizes that everyone has a price and decides to lock you down before I can pay it. Either way, the game moves forward." Naomi felt rage building in her chest. Rage at being manipulated, at being used, at being put in an impossible position by people who saw her as a tool rather than a person. She'd felt this before, in foster homes and group homes, and every other situation where adults with power had moved her around like a chess piece without asking what she wanted. "I'm done with this conversation," she said, turning toward the door. "Naomi..." Vincent's voice stopped her. "One more thing. That friend of yours from foster care. Jasmine, right? The deaf girl who taught you sign language?" Ice water flooded Naomi's veins. "How do you..." "I know everything about you. Where you've lived, who you've known, what you care about. That's how this works. And I know that Jasmine is currently living in Philadelphia, working 3 jobs to afford a tiny apartment, struggling with the same lack of support system that you are. I know she's one missed paycheck away from homelessness, one medical emergency away from disaster. Don't you dare. I'm not threatening her. I'm pointing out that the money I'm offering could help both of you, could give you resources to support the person who mattered most to you when you had nothing. Think about that while you're deciding whether betraying Olivia Brown is worth it. Think about who really deserves your loyalty, a rich woman who'll be fine regardless of what happens, or the friend who suffered alongside you and is still suffering now." The manipulation was blatant, obvious, and still effective, because Vincent was right. Jasmine had been her real family, her chosen sister, and knowing she was struggling while Naomi worked for people with obscene wealth felt wrong in a way that gnawed at her constantly. "Friday," Vincent said again. "You have until Friday. Choose wisely." Naomi left without responding, walking back toward the mansion through gardens that suddenly felt like a labyrinth designed to trap her. The security cameras tracked her progress, and she wondered if Michael was watching, if he'd seen the entire conversation, if he was already deciding her fate. The mansion was mostly dark when she re-entered through the service door. Staff had finished cleaning up and gone home, leaving only the night security and whatever crisis was happening upstairs between Michael and Olivia. Naomi moved through the shadows, heading toward the exit, wanting nothing more than to get on a bus and go home and pretend this night had never happened. But Michael's voice stopped her. "My office, now." He stood in the doorway of his study, backlit by the desk lamp, his expression unreadable. This was it, the confrontation, the moment where she'd either keep her job or lose everything. Naomi followed him into the office, a room she'd only glimpsed before. It was all dark wood and leather chairs, and the kind of masculine decor that screamed power. Michael gestured to a chair across from his desk, and she sat, trying to keep her spine straight, her expression neutral. Michael poured 2 glasses of whiskey, slid one across the desk to her. "Drink. You look like you need it." She did need it. She took a sip, felt the burn, welcomed the distraction from the chaos in her head. "I watched your conversation with Vincent," Michael said without preamble. "Saw the whole thing. The cameras in the pool house feed directly to my phone. So I know what he offered you. $5,000 a week to spy on me and my wife, to turn you into his asset. I didn't agree, I know. You asked questions, bought time, didn't commit either way. That was smart." Michael took a drink of his own whiskey, studying her. "But here's what I need to know. Are you going to take his offer?" Naomi met his eyes, seeing the calculation there, the assessment of her worth and her threat level. "No." "Why not?" "Because Olivia trusts me, and I don't betray people who trust me." "Noble. Also possibly stupid. Vincent's offering you life-changing money, security you've never had, protection from whatever's coming. And you're turning that down for what? Friendship with a woman you've known a month?" "Yes." Michael stared at her for a long moment, then something in his expression shifted, softened almost imperceptibly. "My wife was right about you. You have integrity. That's rare in this world. Dangerous, but rare." "What happens now?" "Now I make you an offer of my own. Not 5,000. I'm not going to get into a bidding war with Vincent. But I'll triple your current salary. 4,200 a week, and I'll guarantee your safety. Whatever happens in this war with the Marchettis, you'll be protected. You have my word. 4,200 a week. Still less than Vincent's offer, but from someone Naomi didn't have to betray to earn it. "And in exchange?" "In exchange, you keep being Olivia's friend. Keep helping her engage with the world. Keep making her happy. And you tell me if Vincent or anyone else approaches you again. You become part of my security apparatus. Not a spy, but an early warning system. Someone who can tell me when threats are developing before they become critical. You want me to protect Olivia. I want you to protect my wife by being exactly what you've already been. Her friend, her connection to the world, her lifeline. The fact that this also helps me understand what my enemies are planning is just a bonus." Naomi thought about this carefully, looking for the trap. But maybe there wasn't one. Maybe Michael genuinely wanted what was best for Olivia and recognized that Naomi was providing something he couldn't. "What did Olivia tell you?" she asked. "About tonight? About what she wants?" Michael's expression darkened. "She told me she's unhappy, that she wants to work again, wants independence, wants a life outside these walls. She told me she's been updating her resume, reaching out to old contacts, preparing to leave if I don't make changes." "And what did you say?" "I told her it's too dangerous right now, that with the Marchettis threatening us, she can't be out in the world unprotected, that she needs to wait until this situation is resolved, and then we can discuss her working again." He paused, drained his whiskey. She didn't take that well. She's upstairs packing. Says she's going to stay with a friend for a few days. To think about our marriage. Naomi felt her heart sink. She's leaving? Temporarily, I hope. But if she walks out that door, she becomes exponentially more vulnerable, and I can't protect her if she won't let me. Maybe protection isn't what she needs. Maybe she needs freedom. Freedom gets you killed in my world. Safety requires control, boundaries, limits. I'm not trying to imprison her. I'm trying to keep her alive. It amounts to the same thing. Michael looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression was almost sad. You're young, you think freedom and safety can coexist. But in my experience, you get one or the other. Never both. Before Naomi could respond, there were footsteps on the stairs. They both turned to see Olivia descending with a small suitcase, dressed in jeans and a jacket, her face set with determination Naomi had never seen before. She walked past the office doorway, then paused, looked in. Her eyes found Naomi first, then Michael. I need to go, she signed to both of them. I need space to think, to figure out who I am without all of this. Where will you stay? Michael asked, speaking slowly so she could read his lips. A hotel, somewhere quiet. I'll be fine. You won't be fine. You'll be vulnerable, unprotected. The Marchettis threatened me to control you. Olivia's hands moved sharply, angrily. Everything in my life is about controlling you or protecting you or managing you. I'm not a person. I'm a tactical consideration, and I'm tired of it. She turned to leave, and Michael moved to stop her, but Naomi stood quickly. Let her go. What? Let her go. If you force her to stay, you prove her point. That she's a prisoner, not a partner. Let her leave. Give her space. Show her you trust her to make her own choices. And if something happens to her, then send security to watch the hotel. But from a distance, let her feel free while you keep her safe. It's the only way this doesn't end with her hating you. Michael looked at Naomi, then at Olivia standing by the door, then back at Naomi. The war happening behind his eyes was visible. Love versus control, trust versus fear, letting go versus holding tight. Finally he nodded, turned to Olivia. What hotel? Olivia looked surprised, like she'd expected more fight. She pulled out her phone, typed something, showed him the screen. The Meridian, downtown, respectable, safe, public enough that violence would be difficult. I'll have security posted in the lobby discreetly. You won't see them, but they'll be there. And if you need anything at all, you call me. Understood? Olivia nodded, signed thank you, and something passed between them that might have been love or regret or both. Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with quiet finality. Michael stood in the hallway, looking more lost than Naomi had ever seen him. I just let my wife walk out. You let her choose. That's different. Is it? He turned back to his office, poured another whiskey. Take the rest of the night off. Come back tomorrow. We'll figure out next steps then. Naomi left him there, alone with his whiskey and his choices, and made her way out of the mansion. The November night was cold now, the earlier warmth having fled with the sun. She checked her phone, saw messages from both Olivia and Vincent. Olivia, thank you for everything. I'm sorry I'm running away, but I needed to breathe. I'll call you tomorrow. Vincent, interesting developments. Michael letting Olivia leave makes our job easier. Friday still stands. Think about it. Naomi deleted Vincent's message without responding and caught the late bus down the hill toward her apartment. She sat by the window, watching the lights of the city blur past, and tried to process everything that had happened. In one night she'd been offered blood money to betray a friend, had watched a marriage fracture, had witnessed power plays she barely understood, and had somehow become central to a war between criminal organizations. And through it all, the thing that kept echoing in her mind was Vincent's question. Who really deserves your loyalty? Olivia, who'd never had to struggle, who'd chosen wealth and security over morality, who was only now learning what it meant to be trapped, or Jasmine, who'd suffered alongside Naomi, who was still suffering now, who could be helped with the money Vincent was offering. The question felt impossible. The answer felt like betrayal, no matter which way she chose. By the time Naomi reached her apartment, she'd made a decision. She pulled out her phone and did something she hadn't done in 3 years. She called Jasmine. The phone rang 4 times before a familiar voice answered, cautious and suspicious. "Hello?" And Naomi, hearing her foster sister's voice for the first time in years, felt something in her chest crack open. "Jazz, it's me. It's Naomi. And I need your help figuring out if I'm about to make the biggest mistake of my life." The conversation that followed would change everything, but for the first time since this all started, Naomi felt like she might have an ally who wasn't using her, manipulating her, or asking her to compromise her integrity for money or security or survival. She had someone who'd known her when she had nothing and had cared about her anyway. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth more than all the blood money in the world. Jasmine's voice on the phone was exactly as Naomi remembered, slightly flat in that way voices sometimes are when you can't hear your own pitch, but warm, cautious, and achingly familiar. Naomi Robinson, is this real?" "It's real, Jazz. I'm sorry I disappeared. I'm sorry I lost touch. Stop. We both disappeared. Foster system splits people up, and life happens, and nobody's to blame." A pause, then, "But why now? Why after 3 years?" Naomi stood in her tiny apartment, staring out at the city lights below, and tried to figure out how to explain the impossible situation she'd walked into. "I'm in trouble. Not legal trouble, but complicated trouble. And you're the only person I trust to help me think clearly. Tell me." So she did. She told Jasmine everything, about the Browns, about Olivia's isolation, about the friendship that had developed through sign language, about Michael's world of violence and power, about Vincent's offer and Michael's counteroffer, and the feeling of being trapped between competing forces that all wanted to use her. Jasmine listened without interrupting, the way she always had, giving Naomi space to pour out everything she'd been holding inside. When Naomi finally finished, there was a long silence on the other end. "Damn," Jasmine finally said, signing the word even though Naomi couldn't see it, an old habit from their shared childhood. "You really know how to pick employers, don't you? I didn't know what I was getting into." "Nobody ever does. That's how these situations work." Another pause, then, "Can we video chat? I need to see your face. Sign properly. This is too important for voice alone." Naomi switched to video call, and suddenly there was Jasmine's face on her screen. Older, thinner, exhausted in a way that spoke to years of struggle, but still fundamentally Jazz. Same dark eyes, same knowing expression, same way of seeing straight through Naomi's defenses to the scared kid underneath. "You look tired," Jasmine signed. "You look worse," Naomi signed back with brutal honesty. "3 jobs will do that. But we're not talking about my disasters, we're talking about yours." Jasmine's hands moved with the fluid confidence of someone who'd been signing her entire life. "Let's start with the obvious question. What do you want out of this situation?" "I want to help Olivia without destroying my own life in the process." "Can't be done. Not in the scenario you described. Helping her means choosing sides in a war between dangerous people. There's no neutral ground here. So what do I do? You figure out which side is less likely to get you killed and you play for that team." Jasmine's expression was serious, her hands emphatic. "I know you want to be noble. I know you care about this woman. But Naomi, she has resources you don't have. She has money, connections, options. If everything falls apart, she lands on her feet. You land in a grave." That's what Vincent said. Almost exactly. Then Vincent's smarter than I want to give him credit for. Look, I'm not saying betray your friend. I'm saying remember that she's not really your friend. She's your employer's wife who happens to need something you can provide. The power dynamics there are fundamentally unequal. She's using you just as much as Vincent or Michael would, just in a nicer way. The words stung because they were true. Naomi had been thinking of Olivia as a friend, but Jasmine was right. The relationship was built on need and circumstance, not genuine equality. Olivia needed someone to talk to. Naomi happened to know sign language. Remove that single factor, and they'd never have connected at all. But she trusts me, Naomi signed. She's been vulnerable with me. She told me things she hasn't told anyone else, because you're safe, because you're beneath her social class and therefore not a threat, because unburdening herself to staff is easier than actually fixing her marriage or her life. Jasmine's hands softened slightly. I'm not saying she's a bad person. I'm saying she's a rich person, and rich people relate to the world differently than we do. Their problems are real to them, but they're not survival problems, they're comfort problems. And you're risking your actual survival to help her with comfort problems. What about the money? Vincent offered $5,000 a week. I could help you with that. You could quit those jobs, get stable housing, actually breathe for once. No. Jasmine's hands were sharp, cutting. Absolutely not. You don't take blood money to help me. I've survived this long without selling out. You don't start now. But if I take Michael's offer instead, $4,000 a week, that's still enough to help both of us. And I wouldn't be betraying anyone. I'd just be doing what I'm already doing. Except Michael wants you to be part of his security apparatus, wants you to report threats. That makes you a target, Naomi. When the Marchettis figure out you're not just a maid, but actively working against them, you become a legitimate threat, someone they need to eliminate. Naomi hadn't thought about it that way. She'd been so focused on the moral dimensions, betrayal versus loyalty, that she hadn't fully processed the physical danger of being seen as Michael's ally rather than neutral staff. So what's the answer? Quit? Walk away from all of it? Can you? I don't know. Olivia's at a hotel right now, trying to figure out her marriage. She's alone and vulnerable and probably terrified. I can't just abandon her. Why not? She'd abandon you if the situation required it, not out of malice, but because that's how survival works in her world. The powerful sacrifice the powerless to maintain their position. It's been that way forever. You've gotten cynical. I've gotten realistic. Jasmine's smile was sad. 3 years of grinding poverty will do that. But Naomi, listen to me. I love you. You were my sister when nobody else gave a damn about either of us. And because I love you, I'm telling you the truth, even though it's hard to hear. These people, all of them, Michael and Olivia and Vincent, they will use you up and spit you out the second you stop being useful. The only question is whether you profit from being used or whether you just get destroyed. So I should take someone's money, commit to a side? I'm saying you should protect yourself first. Figure out what you need to survive and be okay with doing what it takes to get there. Integrity is beautiful, but integrity doesn't pay rent. Integrity doesn't keep you fed. And integrity definitely doesn't protect you when powerful people decide you're a problem. Naomi felt something breaking inside her, some idealistic part that had believed if she just did the right thing, worked hard, stayed honest, everything would work out. Jasmine was destroying that illusion with the blunt force of lived experience. What would you do? Naomi signed. If you were me, what would you choose? Jasmine thought about this for a long moment, her hands still, her expression contemplative. I'd take Vincent's money, use it to build a safety net, help Olivia as much as I could while feeding the Marchettis information that seems valuable but isn't actually damaging. Play both sides against each other while protecting myself and getting out as soon as possible with enough money to start over somewhere safe. That's manipulative and dangerous and probably impossible. Yes, but it's better than picking a side in a war where both sides see you as disposable. Jasmine leaned closer to the camera. Or, option 2, you walk away right now. Tonight. You don't go back to that mansion, you let Olivia figure out her own problems. You find another job, maybe not as well paying, but also not likely to get you killed. You choose boring poverty over interesting danger. I can't just leave. Why not? What's really keeping you there? And be honest, is it genuine friendship with Olivia? Or is it the money and the feeling of being needed and the way it makes you feel important for the first time in your life? The question hit like a physical blow, because Jasmine was right. Part of what made this situation addictive was the way Naomi mattered. For the first time since foster care, she wasn't invisible. Olivia needed her. Michael valued her enough to triple her salary. Vincent saw her as worth recruiting. She was central to something instead of peripheral to everything. I don't know, Naomi signed honestly. Maybe it's both. Maybe I care about Olivia and also love feeling necessary. Does that make me a bad person? It makes you human. But it also makes you vulnerable. Because people who need to be needed get exploited by people who need things. Jasmine's hands softened again. I'm not judging you. I'm warning you. Because I've been exploited enough times to recognize the pattern, and what you're describing is a classic exploitation setup. They make you feel special, valued, necessary, and then they use that feeling to get you to do things you wouldn't normally do, to take risks you wouldn't normally take, to compromise boundaries you wouldn't normally compromise. So what's your actual advice? Bottom line. Bottom line? You have 3 choices. Jasmine held up 3 fingers, then signed each option. 1. Take Vincent's money, play both sides, get rich and get out. High risk, high reward. 2. Take Michael's money, commit to protecting Olivia, accept that you're now a target in a mob war. Medium risk, medium reward. 3. Walk away now, stay poor, stay safe, stay alive. Low risk, low reward. None of them are perfect. All of them have consequences. You just have to decide which consequences you can live with, and which would you choose. Really? Jasmine's smile was complicated, sad and knowing. Honestly, I'd probably choose option 2. Take Michael's money, protect someone I care about, and hope I survive long enough to make it matter. Because even if the friendship isn't perfectly equal, even if there are power dynamics at play, it's still real in its own way. And sometimes doing something good for someone, even in a messy situation, is worth the risk. She paused. But I'm a romantic who makes terrible decisions. You're smarter than me. You might actually choose survival over sentiment. I don't feel smarter. I feel lost. Then don't decide tonight. Sleep on it. See what tomorrow brings. Maybe things will be clearer in daylight. They talked for another hour. Less about the immediate crisis, more about catching up on 3 years of separation. Jasmine told her about life in Philadelphia, about the deaf community she'd found there, about the constant hustle of multiple jobs, and the exhaustion that came with trying to survive in a world not designed for people like them. Naomi told her about the foster homes after Jasmine left, about the group home that had been her final stop, about the endless parade of minimum wage jobs that had led her to the Browns' mansion. By the time they hung up, it was after 2 a.m. Naomi lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Jasmine's words echoing in her head. Figure out what you need to survive and be okay with doing what it takes to get there. What did she need? Money, obviously. Security, yes. But also, she was realizing this slowly. She needed to matter, needed to be seen, needed to exist as more than just a warm body cleaning toilets and cashing checks. And Olivia saw her, really saw her. Not as staff or as a tool, but as a person, a friend, someone worth confiding in, worth trusting, worth missing when she wasn't there. Was that worth risking her life for? Probably not, but it might be worth risking her safety for. Worth taking Michael's offer instead of Vincent's, worth staying in the game instead of walking away. Her phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. Are you awake? I can't sleep. Everything feels wrong. Naomi stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. This was a choice point. Respond and stay engaged, or ignore it and start creating distance. She typed, I'm awake. What's wrong? The response came immediately. Can we video chat? I need to see someone's face. I need to not feel alone. Naomi switched to video, and Olivia's face filled her screen. She was in what looked like a hotel room, generic, anonymous, nothing like the luxury of the mansion. Her hair was messy, her face bare of makeup, her eyes red from crying. She looked young and scared and human, in a way Naomi had never seen her look in the mansion. Thank you for answering, Olivia signed, her hands shaky. I didn't know who else to call. What about Michael? Michael would just tell me to come home, that I'm being irrational, that I'm letting my emotions override logic. Olivia's hands moved jerkily, her stress visible in every gesture. He doesn't understand that sometimes emotions are the logic. That feeling trapped is a valid reason to leave, even if leaving is dangerous. Are you safe there? At the hotel? I think so. I saw the security Michael posted. They're trying to be discreet, but they're obvious. Two men in the lobby trying to look like business travelers, but watching every person who comes near the elevators. A bitter smile. Even when I leave, I'm still in his prison, just a bigger one. He's trying to protect you, I know. And I hate that it feels like the same thing as controlling me. Why can't love and freedom coexist? Why do I have to choose between being safe and being myself? Naomi thought about her conversation with Jasmine, about the choices everyone was forcing her to make, about the way survival and integrity seemed mutually exclusive in this world. Maybe they can't coexist in Michael's world, Naomi signed carefully. Maybe his world is fundamentally incompatible with the kind of freedom you need. Are you saying I should leave him? I'm saying you need to decide if you can live with the trade-offs: safety for freedom, wealth for agency, love for autonomy. Whatever you choose, there are costs. You just have to figure out which costs you can afford to pay. Olivia stared at her through the screen, and something in her expression shifted, became harder, more determined. I've been thinking about what I said earlier, about updating my resume, reaching out to contacts. I think I need to actually do it. Not as preparation for leaving, but as proof to myself that I still have value outside of being Michael's wife. That could make things more dangerous. If the Marchettis find out you're trying to work again, then they'll what? Threaten me more than they already have. Use me as leverage more than they already are. I'm a target whether I'm working or sitting in that mansion being decorative. At least if I'm working, I'm a target with purpose. There was logic in that, twisted as it was. Naomi found herself nodding. What kind of work are you looking for? Translation initially. Remote work I can do from home or wherever I end up living. Build up a client base, prove I'm still competent, maybe eventually move to in-person work if I can convince Michael it's safe, or... Olivia's hands paused, hovering uncertainly. Or if I end up leaving, I'll have income that's mine, that I earned. That doesn't come with strings attached. You're serious about this. About potentially leaving. I'm serious about having options. About not being completely dependent on a man who loves me, but also wants to keep me in a box. Olivia's expression was raw, vulnerable. Does that make me ungrateful? I have everything most people dream of. Money, security, someone who'd kill to protect me. And I'm sitting here planning my escape like I'm in danger. You are in danger. Just a different kind than Michael worries about. You're in danger of disappearing into the role you're supposed to play until there's nothing left of who you actually are. Exactly. Olivia smiled, and it was genuine. You get it. Christina got it too. Everyone else in my life just tells me how lucky I am to have Michael, how I should be grateful for his protection and his money and his devotion. But they don't understand what it costs to be loved like a possession instead of a partner. They talked until nearly 4 a.m. about work possibilities, about what independence might look like, about the practicalities of building a life outside the mansion's walls. It was the kind of conversation that felt both productive and dangerous, like plotting a prison break while the guards were watching. When they finally said goodnight, Naomi lay in bed watching the sky lighten outside her window and realized she'd made her choice. She was staying. Not because of the money, though $4,000 a week was impossible to ignore, but because Olivia needed someone in her corner who wasn't trying to control her or use her. Someone who saw her as a person first and a tactical consideration never. And maybe, just maybe, helping Olivia find herself would help Naomi figure out who she was too. Two women from different worlds, both trapped in different ways, both trying to carve out space to exist authentically. It was idealistic and probably stupid, and almost certainly going to blow up in both their faces. But it was real. And real mattered more than safe. Thursday morning arrived with Mrs. Chen's opera and a text from Margaret. Report to mansion at 7 a.m. Mr. Brown wants to meet with you before you begin duties. Naomi dragged herself out of bed, showered, dressed, and caught the early bus up the hill. The mansion looked different in the morning light, less imposing, more like just an extremely large house where extremely dangerous people happened to live. Michael was waiting in his study, looking like he hadn't slept much either. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. the same one Naomi had sat in last night, and poured coffee from a silver carafe that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Olivia called me," he said without preamble. "Around 3 a.m. Said you'd been talking. Said you were helping her think through some things." "Yes, sir." "What things specifically?" Naomi considered lying, but Michael's expression said he'd know. "She wants to start working again. Translation work, probably remote at first. She wants to prove to herself that she has value outside of being your wife." Michael's jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly. "I figured. That's what this whole crisis has been building toward. She wants independence." "Can you blame her?" "No, but I can be terrified by it. You know what happens to people in my world who develop independent income streams and social connections? They become less controllable, more unpredictable, and unpredictability gets people killed. Or maybe it just makes them harder to threaten. Maybe if Olivia has her own life, her own work, her own identity, the Marchettis can't use her as leverage because she's not just your wife anymore. She's her own person with her own value." Michael stared at her, something like surprise flickering across his face. "That's actually not a terrible point. If she's known publicly as a translator, has professional connections, social media presence, she becomes harder to disappear, more visible, more protected by exposure rather than isolation." "Exactly. But it also means I can't control who she talks to, where she goes, what information she might accidentally reveal. With respect, sir, you can't control any of that now. The illusion of control isn't the same as actual control. She's already leaving, already pulling away. The question is whether you help her do it in a way that keeps her safe, or whether you fight it and push her further away." Michael stood, moved to the window, stared out at the grounds. "My father used to say that the moment you love something is the moment you give your enemies a weapon. That love is weakness in this business, and I'm starting to understand what he meant. Or maybe love is what makes all of this worth it. Maybe without love, you're just a man with money and power and nothing that actually matters." Philosophical before 7 a.m. Impressive. Michael turned back to face her. "I'm going to make this simple. I'm accepting your loyalty at face value. You turned down Vincent's offer. You're helping my wife. You're staying in my employ. $4,200 a week as discussed. And in exchange, you help Olivia build whatever independent life she needs while keeping me informed of any threats. Not spying on her. Protecting her. There's a difference." "I understand, sir." "Do you? Because the line between protection and surveillance is thin, and I need you to stay on the right side of it. Olivia trusts you. Don't abuse that trust, but don't be naive about dangers either. If she starts connecting with people who seem wrong, who ask suspicious questions, who might be Marchetti plants, you tell me. Understood?" "Understood." "Good. Now get to work." "And Naomi." He met her eyes with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Thank you for being what my wife needs, for seeing her when I apparently stopped looking closely enough." The admission was startling in its vulnerability. Naomi nodded and left, heading toward her cleaning duties while her mind processed the conversation. She'd officially chosen a side, committed to protecting Olivia while working for Michael, accepted money that came from violence and crime and activities she didn't want to think too hard about. Jasmine would probably say she'd chosen option 2, medium risk, medium reward, romantic stupidity over practical survival. But it felt right. And for someone who'd spent her entire life making choices based on what was safest rather than what felt true, that was worth something. She spent the morning cleaning guest rooms and trying not to think about Vincent's Friday deadline. He'd said she had until then to decide, but she'd already decided. The question was whether he'd accept her refusal or whether turning down his offer would make her a target. Around noon, her phone buzzed. "Vincent. Heard you're staying loyal to the Browns. Disappointed but not surprised. Remember, the offer stands if you change your mind. And you will change your mind eventually. Everyone does when things get bad enough." She deleted the message without responding. Another text came through immediately after, this one from a number she didn't recognize. "This is Antonio Marchetti. We should talk. Not about recruitment, about protection. Call me when you're ready to hear alternatives to Michael Brown's promises. Naomi stared at the message, her blood running cold, the head of the Marchetti family contacting her directly. This was escalating faster than anyone had anticipated. She forwarded both messages to Michael, watched the read receipt pop up immediately and waited. Her phone rang 2 minutes later. Michael's voice was tight with controlled anger. Don't respond to either of them. Don't acknowledge. They're testing boundaries, seeing if they can pull you away from me. It's psychological warfare, and engaging at all is exactly what they want. Yes, sir. And Naomi, be careful, very careful. They're moving faster than I expected, which means something's shifted in their strategy, something I don't fully understand yet. Until I do, assume everyone is a threat, even staff you've known longer than you've known me. Trust no one except Olivia and me, understood? Yes, sir. The call ended, and Naomi stood in the empty guest room with her phone in her hand, finally understanding what she'd really committed to. This wasn't just about helping a lonely woman find herself. This was about being a pawn, willingly or not, in a war between families who saw human beings as assets to be controlled or eliminated. She'd chosen her side, but her side had enemies. And those enemies now saw her as worth contacting, worth recruiting, worth threatening. The game had shifted. The stakes had risen. And Naomi Robinson, 25-year-old former foster kid who just wanted to make rent and maybe matter to someone, was now valuable enough to be fought over by competing criminal organizations. It should have been terrifying. And it was. But it was also, God help her, exciting. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible, wasn't disposable, wasn't someone people looked through without seeing. She mattered, and that mattering might get her killed, but at least she'd die as someone rather than as no one. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it just made her tired. She finished her cleaning duties, checked out with Margaret, and caught the bus home. Olivia had texted that she was staying at the hotel another night, that she needed more space to think, that she'd be back at the mansion by Friday. Friday. Tomorrow. When Vincent's offer expired, and everything would presumably get even more complicated. Naomi sat on the bus, watching the city scroll past, and wondered if there was any scenario where this ended well for everyone. Where Olivia found freedom, Michael found peace, the Marchettis found satisfaction, and Naomi found security. Probably not. Stories like this rarely had happy endings, but maybe they had honest ones. And maybe honest was better than happy anyway. Her phone buzzed one more time. Jasmine, whatever you decided, I support you. Just stay alive, okay? The world needs more people like us who remember what it's like to have nothing, who use power to help instead of hurt. Stay alive and stay yourself. Everything else figures itself out eventually. Naomi typed back, I chose option 2. Wish me luck. Jasmine's response was immediate. You don't need luck. You need armor and common sense. But I'll wish you both anyway. Love you, sis. Love you too. The bus reached her stop, and Naomi climbed off into the November evening, heading toward her tiny apartment with its broken heating and its view of other people's lives. Tomorrow was Friday. Tomorrow, Olivia would return. Tomorrow, Vincent's deadline would pass and the war would continue, and Naomi would navigate her new role as protector, friend, employee, and target. But tonight, she had Jasmine's words echoing in her head. Stay alive and stay yourself. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than nothing. And in a world where nothing was certain, and everyone was dangerous, and every choice had consequences, better than nothing was the best anyone could hope for. Friday arrived with freezing rain that turned the city into a watercolor painting, all blurred edges and running colors, beautiful and treacherous in equal measure. Naomi stood at her apartment window, watching the streets below transform into rivers, and wondered if the weather was an omen. Everything running together, boundaries dissolving, the whole world becoming uncertain and dangerous underfoot. Her phone had been quiet all morning. No texts from Vincent acknowledging his expired deadline, no messages from the Marchettis, nothing from Michael. Even Olivia had gone silent since last night's brief message saying she'd return to the mansion this afternoon. The silence felt ominous, like the pause before thunder. Naomi dressed for work, grabbed her jacket, and headed out into the rain. The bus was crowded with miserable commuters, everyone dripping and irritable, the windows fogged with collective breath and resignation. She found a seat near the back and watched the city crawl past, her mind turning over everything that had happened in the past week. 7 days ago, she'd been a maid with a secret friendship and uncomplicated intentions. Now she was caught in the crossfire of a mob war, committed to protecting someone who might not be protectable, working for a man who paid her in blood money, and targeted by enemies she barely understood. The mansion loomed out of the rain like something from a Gothic novel, all sharp angles and grey stone, imposing and isolating. Naomi hurried up the driveway, her cheap jacket doing almost nothing against the weather, and let herself in through the service entrance. The kitchen was unusually quiet. No chef prepping elaborate meals, no staff bustling around, just Margaret sitting at the counter with her tablet and a cup of coffee, looking older and more tired than usual. "You're here early," Margaret said without looking up. Traffic was light. The rain scared people off the roads. Smart people. Margaret finally met her eyes, and Naomi was startled to see something that might have been sympathy in her expression. "Mrs. Brown returns this afternoon. Mr. Brown wants the house perfect for her, as if perfection will fix what's broken." The cynicism was uncharacteristic. Naomi set down her bag carefully. "Are you okay, ma'am?" "I'm tired, Naomi. I'm tired of pretending that polishing silver and arranging flowers makes any difference when the foundation is crumbling." She took a sip of coffee, grimaced like it had gone cold. "I've worked for the Browns for 12 years, watched Mr. Brown build his empire, watched Mrs. Brown slowly disappear into it. And I did nothing. Said nothing, just kept the house running and told myself it wasn't my place to interfere." "So you couldn't have changed anything?" "No, but I could have seen it, really seen it the way you did in 3 weeks. Could have treated Mrs. Brown like a person instead of a responsibility. Could have learned some basic sign language instead of just talking around her disability like it would go away if we all ignored it hard enough." Margaret stood, rinsed her cup in the sink with precise movements. "My point is, you're doing something I should have done years ago, and while it's probably going to end badly for everyone, most things in this house do, at least it's honest. At least someone finally cares enough to try." Before Naomi could respond, Margaret walked out, leaving her alone in the kitchen with the sound of rain against windows and the weight of unexpected validation. She spent the morning making the mansion perfect, fresh flowers in every room, floors polished to a mirror shine, every surface gleaming. It felt like preparing for a wedding or a funeral, some significant event that would mark a before and after. The house was beautiful and empty, a stage waiting for actors to arrive and perform the next scene of whatever tragedy was unfolding. Around 2 p.m., Naomi was arranging flowers in the conservatory when she heard the front door open. Olivia's voice carried through the foyer, speaking out loud, slightly too loud the way she sometimes did, but clear and firm. "I know you hired security. I saw them at the hotel. I'm not angry about it, Michael, but we need to discuss boundaries." Michael's response was quieter, measured. Naomi couldn't make out the words, but the tone was conciliatory, careful. She stayed in the conservatory, giving them privacy, but her hands were shaking as she arranged orchids that probably cost more than her weekly salary. This was it. Whatever conversation happened now would determine whether Olivia stayed or left, whether the marriage survived or fractured, whether everything Naomi had risked meant anything at all. Footsteps approached and Olivia appeared in the doorway. She looked different, not physically but in the way she carried herself. More centered, more certain. Like 2 days away from the mansion had reminded her of who she was underneath the role she'd been playing. "You're here," she signed, her face breaking into a genuine smile. "I'm so glad. How are you?" "Better. Scared. Determined. All of it at once." Olivia moved into the conservatory, sat on their usual bench. Michael and I talked, really talked, for the first time in months, maybe years. And we made some agreements. Tell me, I'm going to start working again. Remote translation work initially, with Michael's security team vetting clients to make sure there are no machete plants. He's not happy about it, but he's accepting it. Says if I'm going to do this, he wants to at least minimize the risks. That's huge. That's what you wanted. Part of what I wanted. Olivia's hands moved carefully, choosing signs deliberately. I also told him I need therapy. Real therapy with someone who understands deaf clients and trauma and complicated marriages. He agreed to that too. Said he'd even join me for couples counseling if I wanted. Will you want that? I don't know yet. Part of me thinks we're beyond counseling, that we want fundamentally different things from life, and no amount of therapy will bridge that gap. But another part of me remembers why I fell in love with him. Remembers the man he is when the business isn't consuming him, and I owe it to that man, to both of us, to try. What about the Marchettis? The threats? Olivia's expression darkened. Michael says the situation is contained for now. That Antonio backed off after Wednesday's dinner, agreed to give Michael until the end of the month to demonstrate cooperation. But he also said the situation is fragile, that anything could tip it into open war. Does that scare you? Terrifies me, but Naomi. Olivia leaned forward, her hands emphatic. I've been terrified for 3 months, terrified of silence, of isolation, of becoming invisible. At least this terror is about something real, something external. Not just the fear of disappearing into my own life. Before Naomi could respond, Michael appeared in the doorway. He looked at them both, his expression unreadable, then signed, slowly, carefully, clearly having practiced, "Thank you for helping my wife." Both women stared at him in shock. The signs were basic, grammatically imperfect, but unmistakably intentional. Michael Brown, mob boss who claimed to have no time for learning sign language, had learned enough to say thank you. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. You signed. I started learning. Online tutorials. I'm terrible at it, but I'm trying. His hands fumbled through the signs, but the effort was evident. I should have done this months ago, years ago. I'm sorry I didn't. Olivia stood, crossed the distance between them, and pulled him into a hug that looked like both forgiveness and grief. Naomi looked away, giving them privacy, feeling like she was witnessing something too intimate for an audience. When she looked back, they'd separated, but were still holding hands, and Michael was speaking, slowly, facing Olivia, so she could read his lips. I need to tell you both something, about the Marchettis and why they're escalating. They moved to the sitting room, all 3 of them, which felt significant somehow. Michael sitting in the armchair, Olivia and Naomi on the couch, the dynamics shifting in subtle ways that suggested things were changing, boundaries being redrawn. The shipment Antonio mentioned at dinner, Michael said, speaking clearly for Olivia, while Naomi translated into sign for emphasis. It wasn't just a business deal, it was evidence, records, documentation, names and dates and details about operations that go back 15 years. I've been building a case, not for the police, but for insurance, leverage. Information I could release if things went wrong that would take down not just the Marchettis, but half the organized crime families in the region. That's why they're so aggressive, Naomi said, understanding clicking into place. You're not just a business rival, you're an existential threat. Exactly. And they know I moved the evidence somewhere safe, somewhere they can't reach it. They've been trying to figure out where, trying to find leverage to force me to give it up. That's why they threatened Olivia. That's why Vincent tried to recruit you. They're looking for any way into my life, any vulnerability they can exploit. So what happens now? Olivia asked, her hands forming the question even as she spoke out loud. Now we wait. I've agreed to turn over some of the less damaging evidence as a show of good faith. Enough to prove I'm willing to cooperate, not enough to eliminate my leverage. If they accept that, we have a truce. If they don't... Michael's expression hardened. If they don't, things get very ugly very fast. And we're just supposed to sit here waiting to find out if we're about to be at war. Olivia's hands moved sharply, angrily. Living in suspense until the Marchettis decide our fate? No. You're supposed to build the life you want while I handle the threats. That's always been the division of labor in our marriage, Liv. I handle the darkness so you can exist in the light. Maybe that's not fair. Maybe it's not healthy. But it's kept you alive and relatively safe for 10 years. I'm asking you to trust me to keep doing that while you work and heal and figure out who you want to be. And if I can't trust that anymore? If I can't separate my life from your darkness when your darkness keeps bleeding into everything? Then we'll figure something else out, but not today. Today we're still married, still committed, still trying. Okay? Olivia nodded slowly, and Naomi felt the weight of their history, all the years of love and compromise and slow dissolution, in that single gesture. This wasn't resolved. It was just postponed. But maybe that was enough for now. Michael's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression shifted into something harder, more dangerous. I have to take this work thing. Naomi, stay with Olivia. Don't let her out of your sight until I get back. Then he was gone, striding toward his office with the phone already to his ear, and Naomi and Olivia were alone in the sitting room with the sound of rain against windows and the lingering echo of temporary peace. He means well, Olivia signed after a long silence. He really does, but his version of love is so consuming that there's no room left for me to breathe. Are you going to leave him? I don't know. Ask me in a month, or a year, or 10 years. Olivia's smile was sad. Marriage is complicated, especially marriages like mine, where love and danger and money and control are all tangled together so tightly. You can't separate them anymore. You could separate them if you wanted to, if you chose to. Could I? Could I really start over at 39 with no recent work history and a target on my back from my estranged husband's enemies? Could I survive independently when I've spent 10 years being protected and isolated and dependent? Yes. You're stronger than you think you are. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just a woman who made choices that seemed reasonable at the time, and now I'm living with the consequences. Olivia stood, moved to the window, watched the rain. Tell me something. Why did you stay? After Vincent's offer, after seeing how dangerous this all is, why didn't you just quit and walk away? Naomi thought about lying, about giving some noble answer about loyalty or friendship, but Olivia deserved honesty, even if it was complicated, because for the first time in my life, I matter to someone. Really matter, not just as a case file, or an employee number, or a warm body filling a slot. You see me. And being seen is addictive even when it's dangerous. So we're both trapped by being seen. Me by Michael's obsessive protection, you by my desperate need for connection. Olivia turned back from the window, her expression wry. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Two women using each other to feel less alone, pretending it's friendship when it's really mutual survival. Maybe it started that way, but it's become more than that, at least for me. For me too. Olivia crossed back to the couch, sat close enough that their shoulders touched. Thank you for staying, for risking everything to help someone you barely know, for being the friend I needed when I didn't even know how to ask for one. They sat in comfortable silence, two women from different worlds who'd found common ground in isolation and sign language and the shared experience of feeling invisible in rooms full of people. Naomi's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. A text from a blocked number. Look out the window. East side by the gate. Tell me what you see. Ice flooded her veins. She stood, moved to the window Olivia had just vacated, looked toward the east gate. A black SUV was parked just outside the property, visible through the rain. As she watched, someone in the driver's seat raised a phone, taking pictures of the mansion, of the windows, of her standing there looking out. Olivia, Naomi said out loud, forgetting to sign in her panic. We need to get Michael. Now. Another text. Pretty house, lots of windows, easy to see inside, easy to know who's where. Tell Michael we'll be in touch, and tell him the end-of-month deadline just got shorter. He has until Monday to turn over all the evidence, or we start making his wife's life very interesting. Naomi grabbed Olivia's hand, pulled her away from the windows. Someone's outside, taking pictures, the Marchettis, they're threatening you. Olivia's face went pale, but she nodded with surprising calm. Get Michael. I'll stay here, away from windows. Naomi ran toward Michael's office, her heart hammering, the feeling of being watched crawling across her skin like insects. She burst through the door without knocking, Michael was still on the phone, but his expression shifted immediately when he saw her face. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, already standing. "What happened?" She showed him the texts, watched his face go through emotions too fast to track. Surprise, rage, calculation, cold determination. He immediately pulled out his own phone, barked orders to security. "Eastgate, black SUV. I want them gone and I want to know who they are. Now." Then he was moving past her, heading toward Olivia, and Naomi followed. The mansion suddenly felt less like a fortress and more like a target. Every window an exposure, every room a potential trap. They found Olivia sitting on the floor of the sitting room, her back against the wall, positioned so no window had a line of sight. She looked small and scared and furious all at once. "They're outside our house," she signed when Michael entered. "Taking pictures like we're a tourist attraction, like our fear is entertainment." Michael knelt beside her, pulled out his phone, showed her something. Security footage, Naomi realized, of the SUV being surrounded by Brown family security, the occupants being detained, the vehicle being searched. They're handled. They won't get away with this. But they already did. They got close enough to take pictures, close enough to show us they can reach me whenever they want. The deadline is meaningless if they're already making moves. This was psychological warfare, intimidation. They're not actually going to... "How do you know?" Olivia's hands were sharp, cutting. "How do you know what they will or won't do? You said yourself this is escalating faster than expected. That something shifted in their strategy. Maybe what shifted is they decided I'm more valuable as a corpse than as leverage." The brutal pragmatism of the statement hung in the air like poison gas. Michael's face went through something complicated: horror, recognition, denial, acceptance. "I won't let that happen," he said finally, signing as he spoke. "I will burn down everything I've built before I let them touch you." "Then maybe you should just give them what they want. Turn over the evidence. End this before someone gets hurt." "If I give them everything, we have no protection, no leverage, no guarantee they won't hurt us anyway just to make a point." Michael stood, paced like a caged animal. "I need time. Time to secure better protection. Time to move you somewhere safer. Time to coordinate with the other families so the Marchettis can't act without consequences. Time is what we don't have." Olivia was standing now too, her voice rising with stress. "They just proved they can reach into our home, Michael. They're not waiting until Monday. They're escalating now today, and you're still trying to strategize like this is a business negotiation instead of a war." "It's both. It's always both, and if I make the wrong move, if I capitulate too quickly or fight too hard, then I die either way, just at a different speed." The argument spiraled, voices rising, hands moving frantically through signs that were getting sloppy with emotion. Naomi stood near the door, feeling like an intruder but unable to leave, watching a marriage crack under pressure it was never designed to withstand. Her phone buzzed again. "Vincent. Enjoying the show? This is just the opening act. Wait until you see what we have planned for the finale. You still have time to switch sides, by the way. My offer stands. $5,000 a week to help us instead of fighting us. Think about it." She showed the message to Michael, who read it with an expression that could have curdled milk. "They're coming after her specifically now," he said, gesturing to Naomi, "trying to flip her because they know she's close to Olivia. That's desperation. They're running out of time, too. Or they're confident enough in their plan that they can toy with us," Naomi countered. "We don't actually know what they're capable of or how close they are to making a real move. Which is why..." Michael turned to Olivia, his expression set with determination. "You're leaving. Today. I'm sending you somewhere safe with full security until this is resolved. No. Liv, please. No. I'm not running. I'm not hiding. I'm not being locked away in some safe house while you fight a war over evidence I don't even fully understand. If I'm the target, I deserve to know what I'm a target for. I deserve to be part of the solution instead of just the problem. You're not the problem. Then stop treating me like one. Stop making decisions about my safety without including me in the conversation. Stop acting like I'm a child who needs protection instead of a partner who deserves respect." Michael looked at her for a long moment, and Naomi saw something shift in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or resignation. What do you want to do? I want to see the evidence. I want to understand what's so important that people are willing to kill for it. And then I want to help you decide what to do with it. Together, as partners, the way we should have been operating all along. Some things you're better off not knowing. I'm already living with the consequences of things I don't know. At least if I know them, I can make informed decisions instead of just reacting to threats I don't understand. Michael was silent for a long time, warring with himself, decades of control and secrecy battling against love and the recognition that Olivia was right. Finally, he nodded. Okay, I'll show you. But not here. Not with the Marchettis watching the house. We go somewhere neutral, somewhere safe. Where? I have a place, off the grid, unknown to anyone outside my closest circle. We'll go there. I'll show you everything, and we'll figure out our next move together. Agreed? Agreed. They both turned to Naomi, and she realized they expected her to come too. She was part of this now, whether she wanted to be or not. Part of the inner circle, part of the solution, part of the risk. I'm in, she said, because what else could she say? She'd already chosen her side. Might as well see it through to whatever end was coming. Michael made phone calls, coordinated security, arranged transportation. Within an hour, they were moving. Michael, Olivia, Naomi, and 4 security personnel, all loaded into 2 SUVs with tinted windows and the kind of serious energy that said violence was expected and prepared for. They drove for 2 hours through rain that never let up, eventually leaving the city behind for suburbs, then exurbs, then empty highways flanked by forests. The safe house turned out to be a cabin, rustic but well-maintained, isolated on 20 acres of private property, the kind of place that wouldn't appear on any maps or records. Inside, it was surprisingly comfortable. Leather furniture, a massive stone fireplace, technology that suggested this was more command center than vacation home. Michael led them to a back room where a wall safe was hidden behind a false panel. Everything's in here, he said, opening the safe to reveal stacks of files, hard drives, USB sticks. 15 years of documentation, names, dates, transactions, photographs, enough evidence to dismantle not just the Marchetti family, but the entire network of families operating in the region. He pulled out files, spread them on a table, and began walking them through it. The scope was staggering. Money laundering, drug trafficking, human trafficking, murders documented with the casual precision of business records. Naomi felt sick reading through it, seeing the scale of suffering that had funded the mansion, the cars, the lifestyle she'd been cleaning up after for weeks. Olivia's face went through emotions too complex to name as she read. This was her husband's world, laid bare. The foundation their marriage was built on, the source of every comfort she'd ever enjoyed. This is what you've been protecting, she signed finally, her hands shaking. This is what the threats are about, not business competition. Evidence of crimes that would put everyone away for life. Evidence that keeps us alive, Michael corrected. As long as I have this, the other families can't move against me without risking exposure themselves. It's mutually assured destruction, the only thing preventing open war. And the Marchettis want it so they can eliminate that threat, so they can operate without fear of exposure. Yes. Olivia sat down heavily, staring at the evidence spread across the table like it was a snake that might bite. We're going to turn it in to the authorities, all of it. What? Michael's voice was sharp with shock. You heard me. We're going to take all of this evidence and give it to someone who can actually do something with it. Federal prosecutors, the FBI, whoever handles this kind of thing. We're going to bring down the whole system. That would destroy me. Destroy us. Everything we have is built on suffering, on crimes and violence and pain. I've been pretending not to know that for 10 years, but now I can't unknow it. Can't unsee these names, these faces, these crimes. Olivia's hands moved with absolute certainty. I won't spend the rest of my life as the wife of a criminal empire. I won't be complicit anymore, even if it means losing everything. You'll lose more than everything. You'll be a target for every family member who survives prosecution, every associate who blames us for their arrest. We'll never be safe again. We're not safe now. We're just prisoners with nicer cages. Olivia stood, faced him directly. I know you did terrible things. I know this evidence includes your crimes too. But maybe that's the price we pay for peace. You go to prison for what you've done. I build a new life with nothing. And we both finally get free of this nightmare. Michael looked like he'd been shot. You want me to turn myself in? To accept prison time? To sacrifice everything I've built? I want you to do the right thing. Finally. After years of doing wrong things for what you told yourself were right reasons. The silence that followed was crushing. Naomi stood frozen, watching a marriage disintegrate in real time, watching the moment when love and morality collided and only one could survive. Michael turned to Naomi as if she might have answers. What do you think? You're the neutral party here, the outside perspective. What would you do? Naomi thought about foster care, about Jasmine, about every time the system had failed them because people with power chose self-interest over justice. She thought about the communities destroyed by the very crimes documented in these files, about the families torn apart, the lives ruined, the suffering that had funded crystal chandeliers and marble floors. I think Olivia's right, she said quietly. I think you've been choosing safety over justice for so long that you've forgotten there are some things more important than survival, and I think if you really love her, if you really want her to be free, you'll let her make this choice even if it destroys you. Michael looked at her for a long moment, then at the files spread across the table, then at Olivia standing there with tears streaming down her face and absolute determination in her posture. If I do this, he said slowly, I'm looking at 20 years minimum, maybe life. And you, he turned to Olivia, you become the wife who turned on her husband, who sent him to prison. The families won't forgive that. You'll be in danger for the rest of your life. Then I'll be in danger while living honestly, instead of safely while living a lie. That's my choice, Michael. That's the freedom I'm demanding. The freedom to choose my own path, even if it's dangerous. Michael closed his eyes, and Naomi watched him go through the calculation. Love versus self-preservation, control versus letting go, the empire he'd built versus the woman he'd built it for. When he opened his eyes again, something had shifted. Some fundamental decision made. Okay, he said simply. We'll do it. We'll turn over the evidence, bring down the whole system, accept whatever consequences come. He looked at Olivia with an expression of such raw love and pain that Naomi had to look away. But we do it together, as partners. If I'm going down, at least I'm going down doing the right thing for the right person. Olivia crossed to him, pulled him into a hug that looked like both triumph and grief, and they stood there holding each other while the rain hammered against the windows and the weight of their decision settled over everything. Naomi felt something breaking in her chest, something that might have been hope or might have been recognition. This was what real love looked like. Not the fairy tale version where everything worked out perfectly, but the messy, complicated version where you chose someone's well-being over your own interests, where you let them be right even when it cost you everything. Michael pulled back from Olivia, wiped his eyes quickly, and turned to Naomi. You should go. Before this goes public, before you become associated with all of this, take some money, enough to get you settled somewhere safe and disappear. Start over. You've earned that much. What? No. He's right, Olivia signed, her expression sad but certain. Once we do this, we're both targets. Anyone associated with us becomes collateral damage. You've already risked too much. Let us give you this. Let us protect you the way you protected me. Naomi wanted to argue, but she saw the logic, saw the gift they were offering. Escape with enough money to actually build something stable. The freedom she'd been desperate for her entire life. But she also saw what she'd be leaving behind. The first real friendship she'd had since Jasmine, the feeling of mattering to someone, the chance to see this through to whatever end was coming. I'm staying, she said firmly, until the evidence is turned in, until you're both safe, or at least as safe as you're going to get. You need someone who can bridge between your worlds, someone who understands both isolation and survival. That's me. So I'm staying. They tried to argue, but Naomi was immovable. Finally, they accepted her decision with a mix of gratitude and guilt, and the three of them began the work of planning how to turn over evidence that would dismantle an empire and reshape all their lives forever. They spent the weekend at the cabin, coordinating with federal prosecutors who couldn't quite believe what was being offered, arranging protection for Olivia and Naomi, preparing for Michael's inevitable arrest. It was exhausting and terrifying, and strangely liberating, like watching a building demolition in slow motion, everything carefully planned to collapse in exactly the right way. Monday morning, federal agents arrived at the cabin to take custody of the evidence and take Michael into custody. He kissed Olivia goodbye with a tenderness that made Naomi's chest ache, signed, "I love you" with his imperfect ASL, and walked out to the waiting vehicles with his hands cuffed in front of him. Through it all, he never stopped looking back at Olivia, even as they loaded him into the car, even as the convoy pulled away toward whatever future waited. And Olivia stood at the cabin window watching him go, her hands signing "I love you too" to the empty space where he'd been, tears streaming down her face. The next weeks were chaos. News broke about the evidence, about the arrests being made across multiple crime families, about Michael Brown turning himself in and cooperating fully with prosecutors. The mansion was seized as evidence. Olivia's accounts were frozen pending investigation into whether she'd been complicit or merely ignorant. But through it all, she and Naomi stayed together, first at the cabin under federal protection, then at a small apartment the prosecutors arranged, then eventually at a modest house Olivia rented with the limited funds that weren't tied up in legal proceedings. They built a life together, not as employer and employee, but as friends, real friends, equal partners helping each other navigate the aftermath of destruction. Olivia started working as a translator, remote work initially, then eventually building up to in-person assignments as the threat level decreased. Naomi went back to school, using money that Olivia insisted on giving her to get training in social work, determined to help other kids aging out of foster care, avoid the traps she'd barely escaped. And 6 months after that day at the cabin, Naomi stood in a small courtroom watching Michael Brown accept a plea deal, 15 years in exchange for his testimony against the other families. Olivia sat beside her, signing throughout the proceedings, her face composed but her hands shaking. When it was over, when Michael had been led away to begin his sentence, they walked out into brilliant sunshine that felt wrong, given the gravity of what had just happened. "How are you?" Naomi signed, devastated, relieved, guilty, free. Olivia's hands formed each word carefully, all of it at once. "Is that possible? I think that's exactly what freedom feels like, complicated and painful and worth it." They walked to Naomi's car, a used sedan she'd bought with money she'd earned honestly, no blood on it, no strings attached. As they drove away from the courthouse, Olivia turned to her. "Thank you," she signed, "for seeing me when no one else did, for staying when anyone sensible would have run. For helping me find the courage to choose honesty over safety. Thank you for the same, for making me feel like I mattered, for teaching me that real friendship means risking everything, not just giving what's comfortable." Naomi thought about Jasmine, who she'd reconnected with properly now, who was planning to move closer so they could rebuild the friendship that foster care had fractured. She thought about Margaret, who'd sent a card saying she was proud of them both and had started learning sign language herself. She thought about Michael sitting in a prison cell, but finally at peace with himself, finally free of the weight of an empire built on suffering. And she thought about the girl she'd been 7 months ago, invisible, desperate, cleaning toilets for people who never saw her. That girl was gone. In her place was someone who mattered, not because of money or power or any external validation, but because she'd chosen to see someone else's pain and had risked everything to help. That night, in the small house they shared, Olivia made dinner while Naomi studied for her social work certification exam. They worked in comfortable silence, occasionally signing to each other about nothing important, building the kind of ordinary life that both of them had been missing. Later, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over a neighborhood that was modest but theirs, Olivia signed, "Do you ever regret it? Everything that happened? All that we lost?" Naomi thought about this carefully, looking at the woman beside her, no longer Mrs. Brown, wealthy and isolated, but just Olivia, translator and friend and fellow survivor of circumstances neither of them had controlled. "I regret that people got hurt," Naomi signed. "I regret that Michael's in prison and that you lost the life you knew. But do I regret helping you? Being your friend, choosing honesty over safety?" She paused, making sure Olivia could see her clearly in the fading light. "Never. Not for a second. Because you gave me something I'd been missing my whole life. You made me matter. You always mattered. I just helped you see it. Same for you." They sat together as darkness fell, two women who'd found each other across an impossible divide, who'd risked everything and lost most of it, but had gained something that money couldn't buy and power couldn't control. Real connection, honest friendship, the freedom to exist authentically even when it was dangerous. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were still threats from families who blamed them for the prosecutions, still financial struggles as they rebuilt from nothing, still trauma to process and fears to overcome, and wounds that would take years to heal. But it was honest. It was real. It was theirs. And in a world that had tried to make them both invisible, one through poverty, one through isolation, being seen, really seen, by someone who understood was worth more than all the mansions and safety and comfortable lies in the world. 3 months later, Naomi stood in front of a classroom at the community center, facing 15 teenagers aging out of foster care. They looked at her with the same guarded suspicion she remembered from her own teenage years, the look of kids who'd learned not to trust adults bearing promises. "My name is Naomi Robinson," she said, signing as she spoke, a habit now. "And I'm here to tell you that the system failed me too. That I know what it's like to turn 18 and suddenly be on your own with no safety net, no family, no idea how to survive. But I'm also here to tell you that you can make it, not because it's easy, not because the world suddenly gets fair, but because you're stronger than you know." She saw a girl in the back row, maybe 16, dark-skinned, arms crossed defensively, whose expression flickered with something that might have been hope before the armor slammed back into place. Naomi recognized that look. She'd worn it herself for years. After the session, the girl approached. "You really grew up in foster care. 7 different homes between the ages of 8 and 21. You. 4 so far. Got 2 more years until they kick me out." The girl's voice was hard, practiced. "What's your secret? How'd you make it?" "I found people who saw me, really saw me, not just as a case file or a problem, and I chose to see other people the same way. That's it. That's the whole secret." "That's it? Just see people?" "It's harder than it sounds, but yeah, that's it." The girl nodded slowly, then walked away, and Naomi knew she'd probably just said something that would either save that kid or get dismissed as social worker bullshit. But she'd planted the seed. That was all she could do. She drove home to the house she shared with Olivia, to the life they'd built from the ashes of everything else, and found her friend in the kitchen, video chatting with Michael. It was Monday, their regular call time. Michael looked thinner, older, but somehow more at peace than Naomi had ever seen him in the mansion. Olivia waved her over. "He wants to talk to you." Naomi took the tablet, saw Michael's face on the screen. He was signing now properly, having taken classes in prison. "Thank you for taking care of her, for being the friend she needed when I couldn't be. She takes care of herself now. I just help sometimes. Still, you saved us both. In different ways, but you saved us." He paused, his hands hovering. "I got word from my lawyers. 3 more families took plea deals based on the evidence. The whole network is collapsing. What we started is actually working. How do you feel about that? Lighter, like I'm finally paying for my sins instead of just running from them? It's strange. I have less than I've ever had, and I'm more at peace than I've been in 20 years. They talked for a few more minutes, then Olivia took the tablet back for their private conversation. Naomi moved to the living room, pulled out her phone, and called Jasmine. "Hey, sis." Jasmine's voice came through warm and familiar. "How was the class?" "Good. Hard. There was a girl who reminded me of us." "Did you tell her she could make it?" "I tried. Don't know if she believed me." "She will, eventually. Same way you eventually believed it." Jasmine paused. "Still coming up next weekend? I found us an apartment near my place. 2 bedrooms, actually affordable, in a neighborhood that doesn't make you fear for your life." "I'll be there. We can sign the lease together." After they hung up, Naomi sat in the quiet house, modest, safe, paid for with honest money, and let herself feel the full weight of everything that had changed. 6 months ago, she'd been a maid in a mansion, invisible and desperate. Now she was a social work student with a purpose, a friend she'd die for, a foster sister she'd reconnected with, and the bone-deep knowledge that she mattered. The cost had been high. The journey had been terrifying. But she'd survived. More than survived. She'd helped someone else survive too. Olivia emerged from the kitchen, her face soft with the complicated emotions that always followed calls with Michael. "He's doing well. Says he might get early release for good behavior and cooperation. Could be out in 10 years instead of 15. How do you feel about that? Scared, hopeful, uncertain?" Olivia sat beside her on the second-hand couch they'd bought together. "I don't know if we can rebuild our marriage after everything. Don't know if we should even try, but I'm glad he's finding peace. That's enough for now." "What about you? Are you finding peace?" "Getting there. Slowly." Olivia leaned her head on Naomi's shoulder, a gesture of friendship that would have been impossible in the mansion, across the divide of their different positions. "I'm translating full-time now, making my own money, building my own reputation. I joined a deaf community group, started therapy. I'm becoming someone who exists independent of being Michael's wife. It's terrifying and exhilarating. That's what freedom feels like. Is it? Because sometimes it feels like falling without a net. Same thing. You're just finally admitting there never was a net, just the illusion of one." They sat together in comfortable silence, 2 women who'd found each other in impossible circumstances and had chosen to rebuild together. Outside, the neighborhood came alive with evening sounds. Kids playing, neighbors calling to each other, the ordinary soundtrack of normal life. Naomi's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Vincent Caruso. Congratulations on bringing down the families. You played the long game better than I gave you credit for. Respect. If you're ever looking for work in a different kind of organization, legitimate this time, call me. People with your skills are valuable in security consulting." She showed the message to Olivia, who read it and laughed, actually laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. "Are you going to call him? Hell no. I'm done with that world. All of it. Good. Me too." Naomi deleted the message and blocked the number. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. That weekend, she helped Jasmine move into the new apartment in Philadelphia. They spent Saturday hauling boxes up 3 flights of stairs, arguing about furniture placement, signing to each other in the rapid-fire shorthand of people who'd known each other their whole lives. "This is nice," Jasmine said. "Signed, actually, since they were alone. Having you close again, building something together. It's what we should have done years ago, before the system split us up. We weren't ready then. We were still kids, still surviving day to day." Jasmine set down a box, looked around the modest apartment with satisfaction. "Now we're adults who've survived long enough to actually build something. That's different, that matters." That night, Naomi drove back to her own apartment, to Olivia and the life they'd built, and felt something settle in her chest. This was what home felt like. Not a mansion with crystal chandeliers, not safety purchased with blood money, but real connection, honest relationships, the freedom to exist as yourself even when it was hard. She walked in to find Olivia cooking dinner, music playing from her phone. She could feel the vibrations, follow the rhythm in her own way. The kitchen was small, the meal was simple, but it was theirs, earned, real. "Good day?" Olivia signed when she noticed Naomi. "Good day." Jasmine settled in. The apartment looks great. We're planning a dinner party next month. You, me, Jazz, some people from her deaf community. Building our own family, I'd like that. Olivia smiled. Found out today I'm getting a contract with the UN, translation work for refugee services. It's not much money, but it's exactly the kind of work I used to do. The kind that matters. That's amazing. It feels like coming home to myself, like remembering who I was before I became just somebody's wife. They ate dinner on the small patio, watching the sun set over a neighborhood that was modest but alive with actual life. Not the sterile perfection of the mansion's grounds, but real people living real lives. Kids on bikes, couples walking dogs, the ordinary magic of community. Can I ask you something? Olivia signed over dessert. Do you ever wonder how things would have turned out if you hadn't signed to me that day? If you'd just stayed in your lane like everyone else all the time? But wondering doesn't change anything. We made our choices. We lived with the consequences. And somehow we ended up here, which isn't perfect, but it's honest. Do you think we'd do it again, knowing everything we know now? Naomi thought about this carefully. Thought about the danger, the fear, the way everything had exploded and nearly destroyed them all. Thought about Michael in prison, Olivia starting over from nothing, her own dreams delayed by trauma and chaos. But she also thought about the alternative, continuing to be invisible, continuing to survive without really living, never knowing what it felt like to matter to someone. Yes, she signed firmly. I'd do it again. Every single choice, every single risk, because the alternative was disappearing into my own life, and I'd rather be scared and seen than safe and invisible. Me too. Olivia reached across the table, took Naomi's hand. Thank you. For seeing me when no one else did. For staying when anyone sensible would have run. For being my family when I had none. You're my family too. You and Jasmine. The family I chose, instead of the one the system assigned me. They sat together as darkness fell, two women who'd been invisible in different ways, who'd found each other across an impossible divide, who'd risked everything and lost most of it, but had gained something that money couldn't buy and power couldn't control. The next morning, Naomi woke to sunlight streaming through windows that didn't cost more than most people's homes. She made coffee in a kitchen that wasn't marble and gold. She got ready for class in a bathroom that was clean but not palatial, and every single part of it felt more real, more valuable, more like home than the mansion ever had. Her phone buzzed, a text from the girl who'd approached her after class. You said you grew up in foster care. Can we talk? I have questions. Naomi smiled and typed back, Anytime. That's what I'm here for. This was it. This was what all of it had been for. Not the money or the adventure or the feeling of being important, but this, the chance to help someone else find their way, to see them and be seen in return, to build connections that mattered more than safety or comfort or any of the things people spent their lives chasing. She got ready for her day, kissed Olivia goodbye, a quick peck on the cheek that was completely platonic but full of genuine affection, and headed out into a world that had tried to make her invisible but had failed spectacularly. Because Naomi Robinson wasn't invisible anymore, she was seen, valued, important, not because of what she could do for powerful people, but because of who she'd chosen to be when faced with impossible choices. And Olivia Brown wasn't a prisoner in a gilded cage anymore. She was a woman with a career, with friends, with choices, still dealing with the aftermath of her husband's crimes, still navigating the trauma of everything that had happened, but free, finally, genuinely free. The mansion was gone. The money was mostly gone. The safety net that had never really been safe had disappeared entirely, but they were both still standing, still fighting, still growing. And in the end, that mattered more than all the crystal chandeliers in the world. The community center was packed for Naomi's graduation from her social work program. Jasmine sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Beside her, Olivia signed congratulations over and over, unable to contain her excitement. And in the video chat window Olivia held up, Michael watched from prison, his own hands forming the same signs, his face showing more pride than Naomi had ever seen from him. When Naomi walked across the stage to receive her degree, the applause was deafening. But what she focused on was the group of teenagers from the foster care program sitting in the back, kids she'd been mentoring, kids who'd learned that someone surviving the system meant they could too. After the ceremony, they all gathered at the small house for a celebration. The girl who'd first approached Naomi was there too, graduating high school now, heading to community college, still guarded, but less so, still scared, but more hopeful. "You were right," the girl said to Naomi, "about seeing people, about being seen. It makes a difference." "It's the only thing that makes a difference," Naomi replied. As the party wound down and people filtered out, Naomi and Olivia sat on the porch like they had so many times before, watching the neighborhood settle into evening. "What's next for you?" Olivia signed. "I got a job offer, working with LGBTQ+ youth aging out of foster care." "It's everything I wanted, everything I went through all of this for. That's perfect. You'll be amazing at it." "What about you? How's the UN work going?" "I'm being sent to Geneva next month. 3-month assignment translating for refugee services. It's scary, being that far away, being that visible, but it's also exactly what I need, to prove I can exist in the world independent of everything that happened. You've already proved that. You've been proving it every day for 2 years. Maybe. But I need to prove it to myself. Need to stand on my own feet in a foreign country where nobody knows my history. Where I'm just Olivia the translator, not Olivia the mob wife who brought down the families. When do you leave? 6 weeks. Which gives us time to figure out the apartment, make sure everything's settled, and gives you time to back out of being my tenant if you want. No obligation. They'd made arrangements. Olivia would sublet the house to Naomi while she was in Geneva, keeping her home base but allowing Naomi the space to truly build her own life. It was practical and emotional, and exactly the kind of mutual support their friendship had been built on. "I'm not backing out. This is home now. You helped make it that. And you coming back to it means it stays home." They sat in comfortable silence as stars began appearing overhead. 2 years ago, they'd been strangers from different worlds. Now they were family, chosen, earned, real. Naomi's phone buzzed. A text from Margaret, who'd stayed in touch. "Saw your graduation photo. Proud of you, girl. You changed that woman's life, changed a lot of lives. Keep doing what you're doing." She showed it to Olivia, who smiled, that genuine smile that still had the power to transform her whole face. "She's right, you know," Olivia signed. "You changed my life, saved it, really. Gave me back my voice when I thought I'd lost it forever. You did the same for me, made me visible when the whole world was looking through me. So we saved each other." "Yeah, we did." In prison, Michael Brown served his sentence knowing his wife was free, was happy, was building a life that didn't require his protection or his money. It wasn't the ending he'd imagined for them, but it was the ending she deserved, and maybe that was enough. In Philadelphia, Jasmine built her own life, working with deaf youth, creating the support system she wished had existed when she was growing up, talking to Naomi every single day. In Geneva, Olivia would soon step off a plane into a new life, terrifying and exhilarating, independent and free. And in the small house in a modest neighborhood, Naomi Robinson, formerly invisible, formerly desperate, formerly just trying to survive, built something that mattered, not through grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices, but through the simple act of seeing people who'd been overlooked and helping them see themselves. The mansion was gone. The danger had passed. The story that had started with a maid noticing a lonely woman had evolved into something neither of them could have predicted. But they'd both survived, both grown, both learned that real strength wasn't about power or money or control. It was about choosing honesty over safety, connection over isolation, visibility over invisibility. And sometimes, when Naomi lay in bed at night in the house she now called home, she thought about that moment in the kitchen when her hands had betrayed her and signed to Olivia for the first time. One choice, one moment, one act of seeing someone who'd been invisible. That was all it had taken to change everything. And maybe that was the point. Maybe the world changed not through grand revolutions, but through small acts of courage, through choosing to see people when it would be easier to look away, through staying when it would be safer to run, through risking everything for connection, because connection was the only thing that made survival worthwhile. The night settled around the house like a blanket, and Naomi closed her eyes, finally at peace. She'd been invisible once, not anymore. And in helping someone else become visible, she'd found herself. That was enough. That was everything.
Thank you so much for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed it, you're going to love what's coming next. Stories even more thrilling, emotional, and unforgettable. So don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and when the next story drops, you'll be the first to see it. Welcome to the family, and get ready because the next story will blow your mind.